everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. It's still cold here. I think we're up to -1 now. Woohoo! Woohoo! We're going to have another -6 tonight. Great. Fantastic. I actually prefer this weather than really hot weather or rainy weather. If they took the snow away, the cold's fine. I don't mind the cold. I don't really feel it that much. I don't like the snow though, because the snow just ain't melting because we're not got above freezing today. So just melt the snow and then we're good. All right. So I nearly actually did my video about this today, my recorded video, but I decided not to because I wanted to talk about Sebastian Rogers. And this, I thought, would fit better with a live stream so that I can just review the entire interview. The entire interview is just over an hour long. Some of you may have seen this. Some of you may not have. I've watched it once. So just letting you know that the reactions I'm going to give are not my first reactions that I had. You know, you're not watching this with me, as in watching me react to this as I've not seen it, but I have seen it. I watched this morning, but I think it's a really, really good interview. So for those who don't know where this is from, this is Fox 59 News had an interview with, I think is that Russ McQuaid? Is that his name? I'm not really familiar with like all the Fox presenters. I don't watch Fox normally. So we had an interview with Andrew Baldwin and Jennifer Auger. So this is the very conference room that Mitch Westerman took photos of, the crime scene photos, and then leaked them to his friend. So he goes on about that. And there's some explosive moments in this. Like, there's moments where I went, ooh. Oh, nice one. Because this guy did not go easy on them. He really didn't. He didn't go easy on them. So, yeah, it's really good. Now, for those who've watched the Defense Diaries interviews, which, yeah, they were good questions, but it was more kind of a conversation, more convivial. It was Jennifer Auger, then Andrew Baldwin, and then last night was Brad Rosie, and they're going to do a part 2 to Brad Rosie. They were really good, definitely worth a watch. But this, like, he really didn't go easy on them. Like, he asked them some very good, challenging questions. I do believe that Brad and Andy are going to be on Lawyer Lee's channel tonight, I believe. Now, I haven't seen a scheduler for it, so I can't tell you what time. It's just what I've heard. All right. So I'm going to say a couple of hellos and a big thank you to Krista. Thank you so much for the $49.99. You are an absolute superstar. I'm going to say a couple of hellos as well. So we are Dust. We got Holly. Ooh, waiting for snow in Sullivan County. Well, you can have the snow that I've got here. It's not deep. It's just lingering around. Ah, interesting. The only thing I don't like is when you say bye. In England, as you know, we call men that. Please just say guys and gals. I saw someone else say it in chat that the majority of people are women. Anyway, I ran over. Look, I've always called a collective guys. Now, I don't know about in England, but generally, I don't know what they do in England, but I am in England, by the way, but I'm not keen on the English. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm not keen on anybody, to be honest. But look, when you're talking about a singular person, if they're a male, you might refer to them as a guy, or a chap, or a bloke, or a lad, or a man, or a boy, right? But when it's a collective, I don't know whether it's just my age group or just my social group generally. As a collective, we say hi guys and bye guys, regardless of gender split. But if you want me to be truly gender inclusive and consistent with my heritage, I'll call you all wenches. Now, wench has got a very negative connotation to it now, but it's very Lancastrian. It's a Lancastrian term that has traditionally been used to talk about or to females of the species. So if you prefer wench, I can use wench. Otherwise, I'm just going to stick with guys. But thanks for your comment. It's interesting. All right, who've we got? I'm not even going to try to say your name, but hello. And Mel, Lindsay. We got CW. Oh, you were going to have a nap. Oh, no. Oh, don't have a nap. Don't have a nap. I fancied a nap earlier as well, but I didn't have one. Catch it. That's a good name. Hello, Asher. Who else have we got? Sleuthy Goosey. Hello, hello. We've got Finn's mom. We've got Grateful. ZC. What? ZCS? ZCS. What's that stand for? Hello, Jackie. All right. All right. All right. All right. Oh, good stuff. Me and Yellow Jacket are working on continuing to transcribe all these interviews. Cool. All right. Oh, we got some members' messages here. So we got, oh, Angela. Angela, you got your OG's badge. Remember, for 24 months, you got your OG's badge. And A to Z, remember, for 7 months. 7 months. All righty. All righty. Oh, we got lots of people talking about guys. I'm in Ireland, live in American time with all these interviews. Please don't call us wenches. I thought that you might not like wench, but it's a very Lancastrian term, and it's not said in any way derogatory here. Hey guys, what you up to? Yeah. Morning wenches and scallywags. Guys is a collective. Yeah, it is a collective of people. Yeah. All right. Hello, peasants. We'll call you all peasants. Let's do that. All right. Without further ado, before we get into the weeds here on gender inclusivity, let's do what we're here to do. Wench is very British. I don't know how or when it's used in other parts of the world, but my granddad used to call me a wench, and he didn't mean anything negative by it. He called everybody a wench. Was it a fella? No, it was a wench. It didn't matter how old they were either. All right, so I'm going to speed it to 0.25. I think that's acceptable for most people. And the link to this interview is already in the description box for those watching it on the replay. And I'm going to pop it here in the chat. If you just want to go over and watch it without my commentary, you are very welcome to do that. Your partner called you a wench occasionally. I've started something now. All right, let me focus. So without further ado, let's get on with this. All right, volume's up.
Gag order has been lifted. What have you been waiting for more than 2 years to say in public that you couldn't say outside the courtroom?
I mean, it's rough right now because we want to remain on Rick's case, and we're really nervous. You know, the state has been, the law enforcement, particularly Doug Carter and Holman, have been going out and saying a lot of, you know, what I would say absurd things. And we weren't, I particularly was kind of advocating, and I think we were all in agreement that perhaps we would not even do any media. That was a consideration until those guys came out and started saying all this stuff. So it's very difficult for us to talk and even answer that question is difficult, I'd say, just because, you know, in the end, we're going to say whatever we're going to say, and we're doing media stuff. And but it's nerve wracking because of the way that things have been handled in the past in terms of trying to get us off the case and that kind of stuff. You know, we're kind of peering into the future and concerned that anything we're going to say is going to be used later on.
Well, honestly, I don't blame him. You know, once bitten and all that. I don't blame him, thinking that maybe Judge Gull will try to use anything that they say in the public domain. There's no gag order. They absolutely can say whatever they want, you know, within, I guess, bounds of their professional ethics. They can say whatever they want now about the case. But because Rick is appealing, and for those who aren't aware, Rick has got 2 excellent appeal attorneys. Let me just share this with you briefly. Hold on, just 1 second. This came out. So, acceptance of appointment, formal notice, appointment of outside counsel. So, okay, accepts appointment to represent Richard M. Allen. I hereby appoint Stacey R. Uliana, is that how we say it? And Mark Lehman. So for those who've been following the case intently, you will know that Mark Lehman was the excellent attorney who spoke at the Supreme Court when Rick Allen's case went all the way to the Supreme Court to get Brad and Andy back on the case. Mark Lehman was really good. I was very impressed by Mark Lehman. So he's got 2 excellent, well, I don't know Stacey, but he's definitely got a good team behind him here for his appeal. Loads of people have asked me, why aren't Brad and Andy like carrying on doing the appeal? They can't. They're trial lawyers. So they need a dedicated, you know, appeal team, you know, those whose professional life is all about appeals. So trial lawyers don't have that level of expertise that's needed in this new arena in the appeals system. But if the appeal is successful, whatever that appeal eventually looks like, if that appeal is successful, then Brad and Andy, and presumably Jennifer, they want to be back on his team for trial number 2. So that's the situation. That's where we're at with it at the moment. So I can absolutely understand Andy, because look, the focus of Judge Gull's wrath in October of 2023 was against Andrew Baldwin. I mean, we heard from Brad Rosie last night on Defence Diaries that, you know, they offered, and we knew this anyway because we got the transcript for this, but, you know, she wouldn't even allow Brad to stay on, even though Brad had nothing to do with that leaking of crime scene photos out of Andrew Baldwin's conference room. Brad Rosie works in a completely different office, different firm, completely different town, but she wouldn't even allow Brad to stay on and Andy to voluntarily remove himself. So, yeah, I understand it, absolutely. Now, Jennifer didn't have that experience, but she knows Andy very well. Like, so she knows what Andy's been through, but she wasn't there in person. She's a newer addition. So she's very feisty. I really like her. I really, really like her. She's very feisty, very, very sharp. Anyway, carry on.
A lot of commentary out in social media and news that, you know, how upsetting it was to people that the defense came up with a wild Odinist theme. That did not come from the defense. Brad and Andy did not make that up. That came from the U.S. Marshals Behavioral Analysis Unit. That came from the FBI. There was some validation from a Purdue professor. This all came from the state. This was released in Discovery thanks to Todd Click. But these aren't things we made up. These are law enforcement theories that they inexplicably did not follow up on.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it wasn't just those things. It was also Kevin Murphy's work, who's a former state trooper with an impeccable record. He put out a 12-page report that that we received in Discovery. I was in the office right next door to here, in my office on a Saturday morning when I came upon it, and it had some really mind-blowing things that Murphy had found and reported, and then I don't know that we were ever supposed to get that.
Don't know if they were ever supposed to get that. Well, yeah, but it was nestled there in the how many terabytes of discovery there was. There's the 12-page Odin report. Can you imagine? You're just going through all of these reams and reams and reams of files, and then you come upon this, the 12-page Odin report. Can you imagine? What a gift. So that's what set the ball rolling with the defense team learning about Odinism and following up on all of the things, well, at least they tried to follow up on the things that the state should have followed up on. And can you imagine, though? So that's where, the idea of Odinism came from, not from some wild speculative endeavor that the defense dreamt up one day, to, I don't know, throw the scent off Rick Allen. No, it was the FBI, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, who said that this crime scene to them looked ritualistic. And then it was people ringing in February of 2017, like in the days after the murders, people ringing in about Brad Holder. They interviewed Brad Holder on February 17th, 3 days after the girls' bodies were found. Patrick Westphal interviewed on the 19th of February. Because not only were people ringing in about these Odinist guys, but there was a personal link as well. That Abby Williams was the girlfriend of Logan Holder. Logan Holder being the son of Brad Holder. We've also heard that Abby Williams had been to, allegedly, Patrick Westphal's house. At the time of the murders, Patrick Westphal lived in Delphi. So, look, you can put all the pieces together, and yes, it's like doing a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and there being 100 pieces missing. Like, you get the majority of the picture, but you don't get the complete jigsaw done, because law enforcement didn't follow up on things that they should have followed up on. So the defense can't turn back the clock and do that. But no, it wasn't their idea. This came from the state. And there's no way of knowing why the state didn't follow up on those things. We can speculate, but we don't know why the state just didn't follow up on stuff that it should have followed up on. But here we are.
But we got it. And that really led us to a lot of investigation of other people. And when we started to put the pieces together, then the Franks memo happened that kind of, exposed all of that, that defense. And, Carter apparently said that he thought the gag order was violated when we filed the Franks memo. What he doesn't know is it would have been illegal for us to file the Franks memo confidentially. It has to be filed because we're a transparent state. And by the way, the state is the one that asked for the Franks memo. They asked for the Franks memo, and we gave it to them.
Yeah. Judge Gull said, well, you're going to have to file Franks. You're going to have to file for a Franks hearing. It was Judge Gull who wanted them to file for a Franks hearing. And then when they did, Judge Gull turned into some kind of, I don't know, pit bull on steroids. That's bad. I shouldn't say that. Pit bulls are lovely. I shouldn't say that. But she turned into this demon thing. Why? Yeah, Harry Potter Speed, I'm confused. The rubbishing of the FBI in this case and the Karen Reid case. Thought the FBI were the best of the best and highly thought of. Well, the FBI make mistakes. the FBI are not foolproof. They're not bulletproof. But the thing is, people pick and choose. So if the FBI came to conclusions that fit the narrative that people want to spin, then they would be the best of the best. And look, the FBI said this, therefore it must be true. But because the FBI said things that people don't like, then they have to be rubbished. Can you turn it up? I can't. This is as high as it'll go. What I can do is move my microphone away, because I'm guessing that my volume is going to be way higher than the screen. So if I turn my microphone all the way over there, and I can actually turn the volume down on my microphone, just a minute, and then you can turn your volume up, and then it should be more of a, just a second. There we go. It'll be more even. It'll be more even now. Okay. Because I have a tendency to shout. So you might turn your volume down. And then when they're speaking at normal volume, actually, they're speaking normal. It's me that's speaking a loud way. But it should be more even now. Everybody's going to go, Michelle, I can't hear you now, but what can I do? Turn your volume up.
You know, and it's all based upon anybody that says that it is some kind of crazy story. Please read it. You know, please read it. I know it's 136 pages and it's long. Part of the reason it's long is because it's footnoted. Everything is backed up. If there's some opinion or conjecture, I believe it's identified. This is an opinion right here based upon these facts that are backed up.
Yeah, and the thing is, what we don't have is all of that, all of the exhibits. We don't have those. So we've just got the 136 pages. We don't see all of the videos and the files that Andy put in there as evidence to back up the things that were being said. That we don't have any of that. So we have to take it at face value of what he said in that Frank's memo. But 136 pages, we read it. We read it here on this channel. I did like, I ended up doing about 5 or 6 live streams to go through it all and discuss it all. And it was all brand new to me. You know, it was like, wow, this is insane. This is insane. But the more you think about it and the more you dig, the more you think, hold on a minute, there's something in this. At least there's a lot more in that theory and those people than there ever was against Rick Allen. And that's my conclusion. That, look, factually, Rick Allen is more likely to be factually innocent than the guys who are implicated in the Odin report. So, but who's in Westville right now? Getting probably tortured. It's not the Odin guys, is it? No. They're the other side of the gates. They're the other side of the bars. They're the ones doing the torturing.
Did Judge Gull run and administer this trial in this case to keep out the extraneous issues, to streamline this case to the provable nexus facts, or did she run the case in such a way as that jury could only go to one destination?
That is something I don't feel comfortable saying. I mean, we have great appellate lawyers that have entered their appearance, Stacey Ulian and Mark Lehman, and those are going to be ferreted out through the Court of Appeals. And I don't really want to, you know, certainly Jennifer and I have our opinions on that. And I think, you know, I think read the Frank's memo, read it, and that provides some of it. After the Frank's memo was filed, there's a lot of other stuff that happened, a lot of other things that we found, a lot of other deposition testimony.
Are you and your client still under Judge Gull's thumb?
I believe we're still counsel of record. The Carroll County rules say that our representative capacity is terminated as of the date of sentencing or final disposition in the case. So, but once our representation is finished and the appellate attorneys officially take over, you know, we're bound by the rules of ethics, but there are no court orders binding us at that point.
Why did it take the jury 19 and a half hours to come to a verdict?
I have no idea. I mean, we've been waiting. Normally, by now, somebody would have come out and at least explained some of the process that happened in the jury room. But
I think the jurors are scared to come out. Honestly, I think they are. You know, if this is all just my opinion, this is completely my opinion. I've no evidence to back this up with at all, but I'm 100% sure that at least some of those jurors will have Googled this case. I'm sure they will have. Like, there might be the odd juror who, you know, thinks that was a month out of my life. I'm going back to my life, and they've not looked back. They've not looked into anything. You know, they've just gone back to their life. I bet you any money, though, that some of them have. And the ones that have will have thought, shit, what have we done? What have we inadvertently become involved in here? So regardless of whether they believe, you know, they voted initially for guilty, or whether they were a juror who originally thought Rick Allen was not guilty, because 19 and a half hours of deliberations, even given, you know, that it was a long trial, is a long time, as they go on to talk about.
But, you know, it's their absolute right to not say anything, and I respect that. We as lawyers would like to know what they hung their hat on, and especially in light of the fact that we are very hopeful that there's going to be a second trial. I mean, I think we've done a lot of post-mortem work in our own individual minds over the last 6 weeks. It's very emotional, very tough stuff to kind of go through. What could we have done better? What could we have done differently? And there's a lot of that going on. And I have an idea of what we could do differently. I mean, as a general principle, kind of a big picture principle that would require me to get into the weeds. But you know, having said that, I have no idea why the jury took that long.
A quick verdict in a couple hours, which I'm accustomed to in Marion County, usually means this is a slam dunk case.
Yeah. That, like, the rule of thumb, and it's not absolutely the case, but a rule of thumb is a quick verdict is one where the state have absolutely proven their case. You know, Sarah Boone, the jury there came back in less than 2 hours. When I was a juror on a murder trial back in 2020, we came to a verdict in about an hour and a half. So, you know, the state proved their case, and it's very difficult to, you know, sit there and think, well, this evidence is overwhelming. This evidence is overwhelming. Shall we consider it more? Shall we deliberate longer? Because you're just going to see the same evidence. So, but 19 and a half hours is a long time to come back with a guilty verdict. It is. So it leads me to believe that at least some of those jurors weren't convinced. At least initially. We don't know because the jurors have not spoken, but I'd love to know. I'd love to know.
Prosecution did this, so I can look at that and I go, well, prosecution said A, B, C, D. Okay, well, I can see why the jury went there. Something that takes 19 and a half hours to get to, considering that you also stood in the back of the courtroom and watched the video that they called on a Saturday that they wanted to keep watching. So there must have been something. There must have been a minefield of evidence or non-evidence that they had to transverse to get to a verdict after 19 and a half hours.
We would love to talk to jurors. We're not angry with anyone. Andy is a fantastic attorney and so interested in the craft.
Has Nick given an interview? Yeah, Nick spoke at the press conference straight after the sentencing.
And we would love to talk to jurors about, you know, how they thought of us. What they thought of the evidence, to be better lawyers, if not to necessarily, you know, unpack all of the facts, whatever they wanted to say to us, we would be happy to sit down and listen confidentially.
What was it that the jurors were limited to knowing, and then what did they think of your client?
Again, we just don't know. You know, I know Doug Carter said that. I didn't watch the press conference, but people would send me clips of it, and it seemed very bizarre. There's also people on WIBC that Doug could have watched that were had a completely different opinion on different shows, from what I understand as well. So, you know, this is a very polarizing case, but I've never seen one where after the verdict is reached, there is still, to this very moment in time, so much questioning of whether it's the correct verdict out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, look, you know, in any case that has been big in social media, you're going to get maybe a few people who will continue to think that that person isn't guilty, you know, assuming that they're convicted. Or conversely, the person's found not guilty, and the vast majority of people think that that's the wrong decision. Like Cassie Anthony, right? The jury in Cassie Anthony's case found her not guilty, that the state hadn't proven their case, and they found her not guilty. The vast majority of people, certainly the vast majority of people that I've ever spoken to or seen comment on Cassie Anthony, believe that she's factually guilty. Right? Constitutionally, she isn't. She was found not guilty. There's a few people that I've seen who think that Cassie Anthony wasn't the one that is responsible for Kaylee Anthony's death, but they're in the big minority. But Andy's right that it's very polarizing, and it is a concern that it is still so polarized after a trial. Now, maybe if we'd actually been able to see the trial, watch the trial, maybe more people would have been satisfied with the outcome. I don't know. I can't answer that because none of us could watch it, could we? So, injustice done in the dark. That's what it was.
There. I mean, that happens like within a family structure. If there's somebody that's accused of a drug case or something and they're convicted and the family can get all up in arms about it. No, this happened and that happened. But we're talking about worldwide, you know, attention to this case, and worldwide, there's lots of people that just don't believe that they got the right guy. And that just never happens. It's very weird, very bizarre.
Did you believe with the case you put on that you did enough to prove he was not guilty, that the state didn't prove him guilty, or that he was innocent?
I don't think we need to go to innocence. I believe in my client's innocence. I believe in Rick Allen's innocence. I don't think there's any way. I mean, obviously, the 12 people on the jury felt otherwise, but they only had one person to point the finger at. But I think that there was a lot of reasonable doubt. But you've got a jury. You have two young girls who were violently murdered, and the jury wants to convict someone. They want to feel like they've done their job. And the only person they can point a finger at in this situation is Rick Allen.
Yeah, and that's really sad. And that's very concerning. That's very concerning for the justice system, because it is very emotive. You know, two young girls just gone for a walk one Monday afternoon, and they are violently, horrendously, brutally murdered. And the jury, you know, see the families every day. They see the state putting evidence forward, and they think, well, given all of this, I've got to find him guilty. I've got to find him guilty. Even if they have what should be reasonable doubt, they push it to the back of their mind. And maybe that's why it took them 19 and a half hours to come to a verdict, because maybe there were some people who were voicing that reasonable doubt, and maybe were getting, you know, browbeaten over it. I don't know.
Did Rick Allen talk himself into this conviction? Because he just kept talking even after he was told, quit talking. His family told him. The cops told him. You guys came on after the fact. But even then, you were his attorneys. And he's talking in prison. Did Rick Allen talk himself into this conviction?
You mean after he was taken to Westville without a hearing? After he was taken to Westville without an attorney? After he was taken to Westville without any evidence that the safekeeping statute elements were met? You mean then?
Well, he started...
This is where Andy starts getting spicy. Love it. And I'm glad that this guy, I saw someone in the chat earlier saying that this guy shouldn't have been the one to interview them because he was very pro-prosecution during the trial. Now, look, I don't watch Fox. It's not a channel that I generally watch, you know, unless there's an interview like this or something. But so I don't know what he was saying, but I'm glad I'm glad that a really pro-state person interviewed them, because he asked them some difficult questions. And he can't be accused of pandering to them. He can't be accused of, oh, well, he always believed that Rick Allen was innocent, and he's just a shill for the defense. that has been fronted towards the defense diaries, for example. Oh, they're just shills for the defense, so they're just going to go on and ask them really easy questions. So I'm glad that somebody who was so pro-state has interviewed them and asked them some difficult questions. And Andy Baldwin gets pretty spicy. So does Jennifer. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This guy was put in his place a little bit here shortly.
Talking himself into it when he was with Jerry Holman at the state police post in Lafayette. He started talking himself into it when he was sitting with,
I disagree with that. I mean, I watched, we wanted the jury to see October 13th interview and October 26th interview. So anybody that watched that, I would think would say, wow, that I don't know what an innocent man is supposed to look like, but I'm going to tell you, in 30 years of doing this and seeing all kinds of confession, that was by far, I was very happy that he talked to Jerry Holman, because, anybody that watches that, anybody that sees it, I hope that it can come out. I don't know what the status of that is. I mean, people are asking us, well, the Franks memo had all these exhibits. Are those confidential or released? What about all the videotapes? We'd like to see those. We'd like to air those. And I have no idea. I mean, sadly, I just don't know how you guys can get access to that. But I think if anybody watched that, I don't think he was talking himself. Rick Allen was talking into committing this crime. It was quite the opposite, actually, until he was taken to Westville.
There are two very...
Until he was taken to Westville. So in the interviews with, so there was the one with Jerry Holman on October 26, 2022. That was the day that Jerry Holman arrested him. But he was also interviewed by, was it Mullin and Liggett, 2 weeks previous on the 13th of October. And throughout both of those, he consistently, apparently, look, I haven't seen these interviews because they've never been released, but apparently he was extremely firm on his answers, that I didn't do this, and Jerry Holman just basically lying to him, cajoling him. So it was only after he got completely, I'm going to say it, tortured in Westville, that he started to, quote unquote, confess. And there is nothing, zero, zilch, nada, nothing that he said in any of those confessions that was information that only the killer would know. Even the white van. Guys and wenches, listen, I knew about the white van. I wasn't there. I didn't murder Abigail Williams and Liberty German, but I knew about the white van. So how did I know about the white van? Sitting here in Northern England, 4,000 and odd miles away. How did I know about the white van? But you see, the thing is, the jury didn't get to hear. The jury don't have the information that we have. Well, there's a chief wench. Yeah, I think Waller put it in his mind. She put it in his head.
Very different statements or themes of statements. You have his statement on the 13th and the 26th, in which he repeatedly and vehemently denied all of the allegations, denied all of the lies told to him by Jerry Holman. Then he gets to Westville, where he is placed in solitary confinement under the Mandela rules of the UN. That is torture, to keep someone in solitary confinement against their will for more than 15 days. It is against the Indiana DOC policy, if you're there as a convicted person, to keep someone in solitary confinement for more than 30 days. So after he's placed in solitary confinement...
Oh, just ignore human rights. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that it says that you can only keep a convicted person in solitary confinement for 30 days because, oh, guess what? We're not breaking that rule because Rick Allen wasn't convicted. And who cares? Who cares about, you know, human rights acts elsewhere? Or we don't care about that because it's not relevant to us. Yeah.
Confinement. Denied any human contact. He's had a history of depression. He becomes psychotic. And, you know, maybe people told him, I don't believe the police ever told him not to talk, but I'm sure people told him.
Miranda rights.
That's not saying don't
Oh, well,
talk.
let's talk about that, Russ. Let's talk about the 2 minutes of missing video on the October 26th interrogation of Richard Allen from Jerry Holman.
Yes, let's talk about that.
To his explanation, and so he claimed, Jerry did, that, you know, I reminded him of his Miranda rights from October the 13th, and I told him he was free to leave. Those are important, you know, topics, because if you're not saying that, then the whole statement can get tossed. Well, miraculously, that's missing, much like a lot of the other evidence. And what's so interesting is, under oath in a deposition, his explanation, Jerry Holman's explanation for that was, well, it wasn't working. So I went outside and then we tinkered with it and then turned it on. And then we saw that it was working. And then I walked back in. What he didn't get, because, you know, is the video doesn't start with him walking into the room. The video didn't start with him walking into the room. So they had no explanation for that at all. And that's a
So Jerry Holman lied. There's the proof. If Jerry Holman had to go outside to, I don't know, turn it on, turn it off and turn it back on again, you know, he gets inside, reads Richard Allen his Miranda rights, realizes that things aren't recording, so goes out of the room, turns it off, turns it back on again, it's now recording. Well, what should be the first few seconds of that interview? It should be Jerry Holman walking into the room. But no. But Jerry Holman says, oh, I'm not technologically savvy enough. You know, that really simpering interview that he did with Hidden True Crime. I mean, come on. Who believed that completely? That guy is a compulsive liar. Prove me wrong, Jerry. Come and I don't know what you can do. You can't do anything to me in England, but Jerry, look, you're a liar, son. You're a liar. Prove me wrong. You're a liar. And time again, you can look at Jerry Holman and you think you're lying. Oh, there's another lie. It's like every time he opens his mouth, a lie pops out. Oh, but though I couldn't possibly have tampered with the recording because I'm not technologically savvy. Well, you just get a techie person to do it for you. How difficult is it? Come on now.
by the way, that's kind of a small thing, but it's really indicative of a larger problem that happened in this case, that there's missing evidence all over the place. And it's not just missing, it's missing evidence of the things that of the third party suspect evidence. It's always focused on that mocked crime scene photo on somebody's social media page or Facebook page. Missing. Jerry Holman was the last guy that I know of to see it. Okay. Now I've never heard an explanation given, nor an apology, nor like, man, that's really bad. We need to figure that out. They're not investigating where it is. I had to drive to Georgia with two guys to locate this, what I would label as exculpatory evidence that is still to this day missing.
Did Richard Allen?
So for those not keeping up, that was a picture, like a mock-up of a crime scene where two women are in a wooded area and they kind of look dead. Now, it's not exactly how the crime scene was found in Abby and Louis' case, but it's interesting that was on Brad Holder's Facebook, and then it just magically disappeared. Fortunately, people had it. People had saved it, and they were able to locate it. Didn't find anything like that on Rick Allen's computer, though, did they? Didn't find any, pornography against children or Odinist stuff or any links to any of these groups. No, nothing on Rick Allen's computer or technology. No.
Lose his mind because he was incarcerated and started confessing, or did he lose his mind because he felt guilt over what he allegedly had done?
He lost his mind because he was incarcerated in conditions that someone, as a pretrial detainee who was innocent under our state constitution and our federal constitution at that point, he was incarcerated in conditions that no one should ever be incarcerated. And it wasn't until that, it wasn't until he was rubbing his feces on himself, it wasn't until he was eating his feces that he said anything remotely incriminating.
And it wasn't because he felt guilt over what he perhaps had done?
I don't think so.
Nobody in this world knew him better than Kathy Allen. Why didn't you call Kathy to the stand?
Well, those are the game time decisions that you make. We felt at the time that we had seen how the prosecution had treated some of the witnesses, and Kathy is a sweet lady. She's feisty and she fights for Rick hard and she supports him 100%. I don't think Rick would have wanted his wife up there subject to that. And we felt that we had, the state had not done enough to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. And it was an unnecessary risk for her to get up there. I mean, juries can read into a wife like, oh, that little facial expression. The daughter, they got up and his daughter got up and they did what they have to do as prosecutors, I suppose. And I just didn't want, I know Rick was upset by the daughter having to testify. I don't think he would have wanted Kathy to testify. Now that we lost the case and people would say, what would you do differently? We would have to reanalyze that. Maybe the jury will tell us if we ever get to talk to him, you should have put Kathy Allen on.
I think they should have put Kathy Allen on. I think it was very important to put Kathy Allen on because only Kathy can say what Rick was like on that evening. So we've heard kind of secondhand, I think it was Bob from Defence Diaries who was saying this, that Kathy had come home from work and Rick was asleep on the couch. So I think it would have been really important for the jury to hear that information. And the fact that Kathy was in court every day and she didn't testify, I think the jury could read stuff into that perhaps they shouldn't have, but I think they could have. And I think putting Kathy on the stand, yes, it obviously opens her up to cross-examination, but I don't think the state would have gone really hard on her. I don't think they would have. Because, she breaks down, she cries. They're at threat of jurors thinking that the state is bullying her for a reason. And I think the defense could have put Kathy on for limited questioning about Rick, about what Rick was like to live with, Rick's, everyday life, and then particularly what happened during that day. So Kathy was at work, she came home. Well, where was Rick? Did he have the washer on? Was he washing his clothes? Did you notice any shoes or clothes disappearing? Now, obviously, the jury can say, oh, well, she's lying because she's his wife. But at least they would have heard it from Kathy. I do think it was a mistake not putting Kathy on. And the fact that Kathy, Rick was asleep on the couch when Kathy came home. Well, if you've just brutally murdered two young girls, would you be asleep on the couch? I mean, I don't know what time Kathy got home, but, would you just be asleep on the couch? Oh, my day went great. I can have a nap now. I don't know. I don't think so. And then, ask her, did his behaviour change afterwards? Whose idea was it to go to the police? To, say that he was on the trails that day? It was hers. She heard about the murders and she said, Rick, you were on the trails. You call him, tell him what you saw, tell him if you saw anything. And if he hadn't have gone to the police, to take that little interview with Dan Dullard, they would have never have even known he existed. So I think that's really useful to know. And as a juror, I think I would have wanted to know that. And I would have been maybe a little bit suspicious that Kathy's there in court and yet she's not testified. But you live and learn, don't you?
These are the things that trial lawyers, this is what stinks about being trial lawyers, is when you lose, you have to do this post-mortem. You have to look and analyze everything. Should I have done that cross differently? Did I forget? Should I have?
Exactly. You'd be pumped up at 2 a.m. like Brad Holder. Absolutely you would. If you've just fulfilled this fantasy, let's say this fantasy has, you know, been boiling over in you for years, and you finally achieved it, you're gonna feel like you're gonna have all this adrenaline, you're gonna feel exhilarated, energized, and also maybe a little bit scared, you know, but whatever it is, it's adrenaline. You're not gonna just be asleep on the couch, are you? No.
Added that. Did we focus on the wrong things? And that Kathy Allen, whether she should have testified or not, that'll be one of those things that we're going to think about.
Was there ever a plea deal in the works, offered, discussed?
No, not really. I mean, and it was one of those plead guilty as charged, and we'll drop one of the murder. There was something. I mean, it's in some cases they just have to go to trial, and this was always one of those cases.
Because there were 4 counts.
We always knew that he couldn't be sentenced on 4 counts, so he can only be sentenced on 1 count for each girl. So dismissing 2 of the counts doesn't. There was nothing like a set term of year offer or anything like that, and it really doesn't matter because Rick was never going to take it anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered.
Why did you turn down an offer to do a polygraph before you got involved in the case? Holman says he was offered a polygraph and turned it down.
Well, here's the thing that my clients tell me when they're offered polygraphs and they don't take them. I have mental health issues. I'm nervous. And by the way, do you trust Jerry Holman? And
no. No, there is no way on God's sweet earth would I have done a polygraph if Jerry Holman asked me to do one. I wouldn't care what it was about. I wouldn't care what the topic was about. There is no way that I would trust Jerry Holman to have a polygrapher give me a fair polygraph. They're probably going to tell me that I failed even if I didn't. So no. Absolutely zero chance of me doing a polygraph. So I absolutely do not blame Rick Allen for refusing a polygraph on the 26th of October. They were going to arrest him anyway. He knew the way it was going. He knew. You could tell, you know, by the pieces of the transcript that has come out, that he knew how it was going, that they were fitting him up for this. So of course, you know, he's got his head screwed on right. He's not going to do a polygraph to try and quote unquote prove his innocence because they're going to arrest him anyway. So no, unless it's the adrenaline dump effect. The thing with the adrenaline dump effect though is it takes hours and hours and hours to come on. So if you've done something really exhilarating, really exciting, or really scary, it takes your parasympathetic nervous system hours to come down. So maybe the next day you get that adrenaline dump effect, but not within a couple of hours of the murders. I wouldn't have thought so. Unless you're an absolute complete psychopath, or maybe you've done loads of murders already. Maybe once you've done loads and loads of murders already, and you know, just a murder is just an everyday occurrence to you, it's not quite so exciting, so you don't have that big up and then that big come down. I would imagine. Look, I'm not a serial killer. I'm just imagining based on the little I know about the human body.
Do you trust the police? I mean, Jerry brought him over there on October 26th when he asked for the polygraph under false pretenses. He went over there, Rick did, because they had held onto his car and he needed the car. So he went over there and, you know, they were going to arrest him. They say that they weren't, but that's just outrageous. And so I wouldn't have trusted those guys for a polygraph for my life, especially if I have mental health, depression and stuff. And I have to worry about whether that's going to be a false positive or a false negative. So
if I'm being interrogated by an individual who tells me that a bullet from my gun is at the scene, and I know that neither I or my gun have ever been there, and he tells me that they have scientists who know that it's my voice on that video, and I know I'm not on the video, and they have scientists who say that that is me on the video, and I know I'm not on the video.
And those are lies, by the way.
Right, those are yeah. There's a string of lies that Jerry Holman said to Rick Allen on the 26th. You know, if they can make up that evidence, yep, how are they going to skew a polygraph?
Exactly. How are they going to skew a polygraph? They're going to tell you that you failed even if you passed. You're never going to get away with it. There's no point. They're going to just use it against you. No, there was no DNA. Rick Allen's DNA was not at that scene. Absolutely. No blood in the car. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing connected Richard Allen to that crime scene. Nothing, not a thing. There was no DNA at the scene, no hairs, no fibers that they could find that belonged to Richard Allen at that crime scene. There was nothing that connected Richard Allen to the crime scene at his house or in his car, apart from the gun. And we heard from the ballistics expert, whose name escapes me now. Can't remember what the state's ballistics expert were called, but she could not exclude other guns. She could not exclude other guns from being the firer or the ejector of that unspent round that was found at the crime scene. So even that doesn't have the weight that the state put on it. Because unless you can exclude every other weapon, then you can't say that that unspent round absolutely came from Richard Allen's weapon. You can't, because you can't exclude others. You maybe can exclude some, but you can't exclude all. And unless you can exclude all, you can't say that that 100% comes from Rick Allen's weapon. You absolutely cannot.
Sitting on that jury, how do you get past hearing from Richard Allen? Every jury says...
That's why they needed the confessions, because they had nothing against him. They had nothing. They knew that that unspent round on its own wasn't enough. So they had to, 100% had to make him confess. And they knew, oh, Melissa Oberg, thank you so much. They knew, oh yeah, she's never been wrong. She's never been wrong. Well, she wasn't wrong in this case when she said she couldn't exclude all other weapons. So just because she got a match on Rick Allen's weapon is irrelevant, because you can't exclude a whole bunch of others. So no, they knew they had to get him to confess, and they knew just, normal interrogation ain't going to work. So what do? They slap him in Westville, they torture him, they send him into a psychosis that that you absolutely would not be no court hearing testimony that this person is psychotic should allow as admissible evidence confessions from that person whilst not in their right mind. They are not competent. And while they are not competent, anything they say should not be admissible evidence in court, except in this case, it was. They needed that. They absolutely 100% broke him. They needed that, and they got it.
We want the guy to testify, and every defense attorney says, I'm not going to open up my guy for this. I'm assuming one reason there was no point in having him testify is they've already got all this video that they've watched and heard all these phone calls. If you're the jury, how do you get past, because remember, we're looking at this the way the jury looks at this, how do you get past, but the guy kept saying it?
The timeline was one way they could have gotten past that. I mean, Jennifer did a terrific job getting our expert, Stacey Eldridge was her name, the forensic phone expert, and she should talk more about that. But the story that the prosecution presented as to what the timeline was blown by the forensic data, which is, as we said, the data is the data is the data, and that's the forensic data showed that their story did not hold water.
I absolutely agree. I've done several videos showing how that timeline, the state's own timeline, when you compare it against the data from Libby's phone, does not work. The state's own theory does not work when you compare it to Libby's phone. Go back and check the videos. It will say, Libby's phone or Libby's phone data in the titles. Go back and check them. I'm not going to crack up my PowerPoint and do it right now. If you want a refresher video on that, maybe tomorrow I can do it. But it absolutely does not work. And I think that they could, I think for round 2, I think the defense needs to do a far clearer job of pointing out every single step in which the state's theory of what happened fails based on Libby's phone data, because I was just hoping that the jury could put it together. But it took me a few days of like just really studying it, really, really thinking about it to work it out. And a jury, where you've got 12 people who all have their own ideas, maybe just didn't put it together. And I think for round 2, they need to have that put in, that they need absolutely to have it with graphics like mine. They need to have it right in front of them and break down every step of the state's timeline and show how it can't, the state's theory can't work. It just cannot work. It cannot work based on what we know from Libby's phone data. And as he says, the data is the data. You can't change the data. You have to interpret the data. But the way that the state have just ignored that data to go with their own theory, the defense round 2 need to really spell it out. And I think that's very important to really hammer home reasonable doubt.
The only time Rick said anything that was even remotely incriminating, the jury saw the videos of him and the jury saw the videos of the conditions of his confinement when those statements were made. And to me,
I don't know how a jury could have got over that. I don't know how a jury could have got over that. Like, we haven't seen them. Apparently, according to people in the court, they were really upsetting, of Rick Allen in Westville. And they obviously didn't see, they didn't see all the conditions. They only saw examples that the jury saw. I don't know how the jury got over that. Challenge the timeline, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the sketches. Well, he talks about Betsy Blair in a bit. Is he getting another trial? We don't know yet, Laurie. He has to go through the appeals process first. You should send them a link to your video breaking the timeline down. They could use that. I think I will. I think I will. The jury were led in a particular way, absolutely. Totally. I mean, that's the state's job, to lead them in a particular way. And it's the defense's job to raise reasonable doubt. So, yeah.
That throws a tremendous amount of doubt on anything Rick said during that time. And the other thing is, just as Andy said, the forensic data, if you believe the state's timeline, Libby's phone was under a shoe, under Abby's body from, let's say...
Take careful note of this, but there's more. The steps, she doesn't mention the steps that Libby's phone records and the height changes that Libby's phone records does not tally with the state's theory. But this is also important. Like, there's this plus the rest of the data that the defense needs to really hammer home. So I will do a refresher video. I saw someone earlier on saying, yes, do a refresher video. I will.
3:50, which is generous, 3:50 p.m. on February 13th until 12:15 p.m. on February 14th. You can't see, when you look at the crime scene pictures, I went back last night, you can't see that phone that is under Abby's body. So, and we know that wired headphones were plugged into the audio at 5:44 p.m. on the 13th and unplugged at 10:32 p.m. on the 13th. And the only explanation for that is some kind of human activity with the phone. So there's no way, and no one ever said, and even the police admitted, Rick, there's no evidence Rick came back.
Okay. I believe her. I believe that someone put headphones in, but I do think that the state could find somebody to say that it could be water in the headphone, you know, the little hole where the headphone goes, you know, in old phones, like smartphones these days, you know, they don't have a dedicated headphone jack. But an iPhone 6 has a dedicated headphone jack. And I did actually find some kind of forum on the internet during the trial, when this was all a thing in the trial. I did find that water in the headphone jack actually can register as that the headphones are plugged in. And I do remember with my iPhone 6, I had a problem one day with my phone. It was telling me that headphones were plugged in when they weren't. And I Googled it, and it told me to clean out the headphone jack, like with a paperclip or something. So I did. And it was fine. Like, it was a bit of fluff inside. And once I got it out, and it took a bit of rummaging, but once I got it out, the phone was fine. So could it be? It's not going to be a bit of fluff, because it took me a while to get the fluff out. So it's not going to be a bit of fluff in Libby's headphone jack that caused the problem. But I think they could get somebody to testify that, no, it wasn't headphones, it was water. Because, you know, going through the creek, it's got wet, it's got like a drop of water in the headphone jack, and then several hours later, it's dried out. The issue with that, though, is that why did that happen at 5:44? Because if the girls were murdered and were in position, the positions that they were found in, by 2:32, which was the last time that Libby's phone registers movement, why did it take it 3 hours to register that there was a drop of water in the headphone jack? Surely it should have registered that straight away. So that in itself isn't, it's not that convincing to me. I think it's more convincing that headphones were actually plugged in at 5:44 and then unplugged at 10:32. An insect, little insect, yeah, maybe. But why? I think it's more likely, given everything else, I think it's more likely it was actually headphones that were plugged in for whatever reason. However, I think a jury could be persuaded otherwise. But what the jury can't be persuaded otherwise of is the timeline that the state has given cannot possibly work based on the steps and the elevation change of that phone. So I think understanding the steps and the elevation change of what that phone is saying really hammers home that the state's timeline doesn't work, and then it becomes less likely for the state to be able to convince the jury that these headphones weren't actually headphones, they were water or an insect or a piece of fluff or whatever. So I will do a refresher video with it all. Where is the GPS data off Richard Allen's car? Don't know. We haven't heard it. We haven't heard of it. Don't know.
So who's plugging in the headphones and who's unplugging the headphones when Rick is at home?
That's presupposing that the phone was there and the bodies were there on the 13th. I mean, you know, what the forensic data, the health data, the Apple Health data supports is that the phone was somewhere else and the bodies and the girls were somewhere else, maybe in an outbuilding, maybe in somebody's house, and the phone stopped connecting to the tower around 5:44 p.m. It reconnected at 4:33 a.m. somewhere else. Then the phone died because of all that activity. And then it died. And that's when, you know, the prosecution would talk a lot about, well, the phone didn't move from 2:33 p.m. On. Well, yeah, it didn't move. It perhaps was in a Ferrell bag or a freezer or in somewhere where it didn't connect. There's a lot of non-connectivity areas in Delphi, and there's a lot of places, and some of the third-party suspects lived in the area around there. And the phone could have come back on at 4:33 a.m., died, then was carried along with the girls to its ultimate resting place afterwards. And that's, you know,
I don't know about that. I think the phone was turned on at 4:32. I think the phone was off, or else it would have been registering movement. The phone had to be off from 2:32 until 4:33 to not register movement. So either off or, yeah, it had to be off. It had to be off to not register movement, at least for some of that time. But I think the phone was turned back on at 4:33 when the girls were in their final positions, so that's why that tower downloaded all of those messages. That's what I think. Didn't someone look into it and the iPhone 6 actually had a button thing in that headphone jack that has to be touched to register? Maybe I've dreamt that. No, if you plug your headphones into an iPhone 6, then you don't need to press anything else. It just registers your headphones. I have an iPhone 6, so I can test that. I don't know if I've got any old-fashioned headphones still. I could test it if I have some old-fashioned headphones. McClellan needs to step down. Oh, I don't think he will.
Well, that is an explanation that is that is supported by the Apple Health data. It's supported by the forensic data. And, you know, maybe we as defense lawyers didn't do the best job of explaining that part of the timeline because it's super confusing. You know, even as I sit here, I'm like, yeah, those are other facts, and that's definitively what could have happened, and it makes the most sense.
If you're the jury, how do you get past the fact that Rick admits he's on the bridge, dressed like bridge guy, and there's only maybe a dozen people on that bridge that day, and most of them are females? He's the only guy that anybody spots on that bridge who looks like bridge guy, and he goes, yeah, I was on the bridge about then, and I guess, yeah, my clothes kind of resemble bridge guy.
The phone wasn't off. It was proven on the stand, so that option was out. That's why I'm wondering about walkie-talkies, because most know the area where there's no signal. Yeah, the headphones are unplugged at 10:32. I don't think they can prove that the phone wasn't off. The reason why they can't prove that the phone wasn't off is because of the Knowledge C database. Because the phone had been messed about with so much, like with all the different versions of data analysis, they couldn't prove whether the phone was on or off. That's what was actually said on the stand. Ask your son if he has headphones. You may have to get an adapter. He has AirPods like I do. I'm more likely to have old-fashioned headphones than him. I think I probably do have some old-fashioned headphones somewhere. Yeah, the log data. Yeah, the Knowledge C database is the log of the phone's activities of, you know, what time it was turned on, what time it was turned off, what time a certain app was accessed. The Knowledge C database doesn't store as like a permanently. It's like a temporary file storage system of the phone's like activities. And because it had been overwritten with all of these different data analysis things that they did over the years, they could not say that the phone was either on or off. No, it's not. It wasn't in airplane mode. No, because it would register movement. In airplane mode, it would register movement because you don't need access to a tower to register movement. The phone just has to be on to register movement. So I can tell by all of these questions, because I have gone through all of these before, all these comments. I have gone through all of these before in videos, but I can tell that we are going to absolutely need to do a refresher on this because, yeah. All right.
He said he was on the bridge about 10. He said he was on the bridge between 12 and 1:30 when he would leave. And then you get this Betsy Blair, who was just a terrific witness in the state. You know, they did not want Betsy Blair to testify about certain things, so they limited my cross-examination, or my cross of her. You know, she described somebody completely different than Rick Allen. She described somebody that was young. She described in their 20s, brown poofy hair. She didn't say that he's short.
Yeah, and she said that the young guy sketch that was released in 2019 was 10 out of 10, was 100% the guy that she saw. And I'm sorry, the young guy sketch looks nothing like Richard Allen. Is there any wonder why the state got the sketches banned from the trial? So any way that the defence could have cross-examined Betsy Blair in any significant way was hampered by the restrictions that were put on the defence team in both what they could say to her, and also the fact that the sketches had been banned from the trial.
Short, you know, Rick Allen is a short guy. Not one person, not any of these witnesses that the state claims were important witnesses said, yeah, he's a real short guy. In fact, we heard quite the opposite. He was tall. He was 5'11" or so.
Why don't you guys ask Sarah Carbaugh how tall the guy was?
Were Faraday bags easy to get in 2017? You can make your own Faraday bag. Faraday bags are easy to make. Kimberly, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Thank you so much. Rachel, Joy, Karen, Peace, and I'm not even going to try to say your name, like Wall, something or other. But thank you so much, Kimberly. Welcome you 5. You get a month's free membership. Go and check out the members area. The members area. Everybody practice making a Faraday bag.
That probably would have been good. That was my cross. I don't know. I think we did in deposition, and she said average or something. I don't know if it ended up being that important with Sarah. So,
not one of their witnesses identified Rick Allen in court. Not a single witness. And of their eyewitnesses, no one described Rick Allen. They described the bridge guy, if you will, is not particularly tall, not particularly short, not in the right age group, nothing about him. And here's the other thing. How do we know that bridge guy is a guy who is seen on video behind Abby on the bridge? But there's no evidence that bridge guy is the voice on the video.
Exactly. With no idea. And law enforcement have said themselves over the years in various interviews that the voice that you hear on the video isn't necessarily from the man that you see in the background.
Teresa Liebert saw someone on the other end of the bridge that day.
where the girls were.
Yeah, Teresa Liebert did. In the morning. In the morning, she saw someone, I think, some people think looks like Elvis Fields. I think he looks like Logan Holder.
Yeah, abducted.
Yeah, where the girls.
But that sketch wasn't allowed in either.
In the south end where the girls were abducted.
I was struck on that Saturday when Doug Carter testified that he was only up there for like less than 10 minutes. And nobody really delved into why he dismissed the FBI from the case. You didn't even delve into the fact that, hey, Doug, didn't you say once upon a time there were multiple suspects in this case? Now, I realize you would have been treading on thin ice if you'd have tried to go to the sketches. But you and I both know there's a way to tiptoe there without cracking the ice. So what I was struck with is why Carter wasn't, because Carter was the main spokesman for so many years on this, saying so many things on the record that would have led away from your client, but you really didn't pin him down on.
You just read that MS is having a juror on. MS. Oh, murder shits. The murder shits are having a juror on, are they? All right. Can we get actual proof that this is a real juror? Not that I don't believe the murder shits would tell the truth or anything, you know, but just saying.
Well, I would have liked to, Russ, but there was a sidebar, an objection in a sidebar, and I was directed what I was allowed to ask and not allowed to ask.
What were those conversations like, whether it was in chambers or in sidebars? Because it seemed like 3-1, and I'm being generous here, the prosecution motions were being approved.
Logan's voice sounds like just like down the hill. I haven't heard Logan Holder speak. So, let's be clear here. Logan Holder was Abby Williams' boyfriend, Brad Holder's son. I'm not talking about Ron Logan. I'm talking about Logan Holder. So Logan was Logan Holder's first name. Ron Logan, Logan's his surname, his second name. Yeah, Muppet shits. Leave Muppet shits alone. Yeah, let's leave him alone. Let's leave him alone. Yeah, they'd find the right juror. Look, yeah. Look, I don't anything that would be said by any quote unquote juror being interviewed by the murder shits. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take seriously.
Or objections were being approved 3 times to every one for the defense. So what were those conversations like, whether it was the day in October 23, you guys were being kicked off the case, after the fact?
October 19th, the only time that cameras were allowed in the courtroom that day. I can't comment on any of that.
Why not?
I just can't comment on that.
Well, then if you can't tell me the specifics, tell me the tenor or what you were up against.
I will say that, you know, I try to be respectful and so forth. And there were good moments with Judge Gall. And sometimes judges and attorneys, not talking about her specifically, they don't see eye to eye. And there was a lot of that in this case. But there was also some good moments during the trial where in the sidebars we would, you know, maybe chuckle a little bit. And I tried to be, you know, nice and so forth. And, you know, it was an awkward circumstance. And, you know, it's.
I think he's being very kind here, honestly.
I can't say a whole lot more than that. I mean, I respect the judiciary, and, you know, I don't know what more to say about it. I can't say a whole lot more about it than that. Jennifer, I don't know what.
Yeah, Judge Gall told us at one of the pretrial hearings she ran a tight ship, and she followed through with that.
Can you talk about what you and Nick McLeland were chewing on each other about after the sentencing? Why not?
That's between Mr. McLeland and I.
Well, it was said in open, you know, it was appeared in open court, and there were conversations and statements made in.
Oh, come on. That's not open court. That's not on the record. Come on now.
Open court that you felt it was necessary to go back and maybe correct the record or the quotes.
It wasn't on a record.
I've had 2 trials televised. My firm has had 3. I think the first murder, one of the first times was a murder trial that 2 of our partners, they aired their final arguments and stuff. And I believe in transparency. I do. And but that's ultimately a judge's call. For whatever reason, she didn't allow that cameras in the courtroom except on October the 19th. But other than that day, there was no cameras allowed, and I'm not really sure why. I respect the judge's decision there. I think transparency is important. You know, as a lawyer, I never would have really wanted until I was in front of I guess cameras on the 2 trials that I had that were televised. You realize as a lawyer, you're concerned that am I going to be so worried about what I'm doing and what I'm saying that it takes away from your client's case and your defense. And I will tell you that the reality of it is if you're doing your job correctly and you're worried about the craft of what you're doing and just putting the work that you've put into the case into the courtroom, you don't even realize that those cameras are there. So, you know, as this being kind of I guess a worldwide case that everybody knows about, I would be nervous if the cameras were in the courtroom, but at the same time, I think we would have got through it. And I think at the same time, it would have.
Yeah, look, the cameras in the court, I know it's a relatively new thing for Indiana, but I don't think, like, when everything else is going on in the trial, you're just going to quickly forget that the cameras are there. It's not like anybody's going to be really influenced by the cameras, honestly. The police chief resigned. Yeah, the current Delphi police chief has got into trouble for lying. Nothing to do with this case, though. But yeah, the corruption and the liability of the Delphi police hasn't improved any over the years. Let's just say that.
You know, been good to be transparent. The judge had her reasons. I don't know what they are, but I respect her reasons.
I think philosophically, transparency is better. It gives validity to the proceedings, and people need to believe in our system. People need to respect our system for it to work properly. And in this case, there were limited seating in the courtroom. As Andy said, there was worldwide publicity.
Did you guys know that Doug Carter's brother-in-law is the head of the DOC there in Indiana? No, I didn't know that. What's his name? We can look him up.
I know that, you know, it was difficult for all of the reporters and the people who were trying to report the story in a fair and judicious manner. So, you know, philosophically, I think that the cameras in the courtroom are helpful in that it gives transparency, and people are more likely to believe and respect and participate in the system that's transparent and fair. I completely agree with Andy. I think the first couple of days for me personally would have been difficult if there are cameras on you, right? It's a whole nother layer. But especially in a month-long trial, you get into the groove of things and you're going to forget about them and do your job as well as you can.
Is this the table in the conference room where Mitch Westerman came upon the evidence?
That's real tough for me to talk about. This is the conference room where he told me that he did that.
Did the leaks set back the credibility of the defense or your ability to pursue the case?
Probably, you know, I mean, I'm just an honest, transparent guy, and it probably did, and it was very upsetting. And I was angry about it. I was angry about the, you know, the allegations that I intentionally set those wheels into play, because that's just a complete lie. It was a really dramatic mistake, a life-altering mistake for Mitch, who is actually, I've forgiven him. I want, you know, people may not expect that, or they may think, oh, that's odd. You shouldn't. That means that you probably had something to do with it or something. No, it's because
Masons are not a cult. Grow up. Who said that Masons were a cult? They don't have to be a cult to be you know, brothers in arms. Protect your brothers. That's what they do, isn't it?
I'm a human being, and he's my friend, and he's a good man, and this forever altered his life in a negative way, and he made a really, really bad mistake, and I feel badly for him, and I hope that human beings can look at a mistake that somebody's made, even as a dramatic a mistake as that was difficult for him to come tell me about it, and it was difficult for me to accept it, but over time, you know, I talked to him and said I forgave him, because, you know, that's part of my faith.
Doug Carter and Jerry Holmes.
He's a better man than me. I'm not sure that I could have forgiven that, honestly. But he's a better man than me. All right, Murder Shits, for anybody who wants to go and check it out. Murder Shit podcast, 27 minutes ago. The Delphi murders, first person, Ajura, part 1. So you can go and listen if you want. 27 minutes ago. I can't play it because they'll copyright strike me. Was it Teresa, Criminality, got copyright struck by the Murder Shits? And she only played like a couple of minutes. So if you want to go and listen to it, you'll have to go and listen to it in your own time. But yes, there is indeed a podcast episode posted 27 minutes ago. It's 53 minutes long. A juror, part 1. We interviewed a woman who served as a juror during this Delphi trial. They struck other people as well. Really? Really? Yeah, videos get put. So if you get copyright struck and you challenge it because you believe that it's fair use, what you were doing is fair use, and playing a few minutes or even a whole interview like I'm doing here, right? What I'm doing here is fair use. Fair use allows you to play someone else's content for commentary, criticism, etc., etc., etc. So I'm using Fox 59's material under the Fair Use Act. But some people will copyright strike for something that is fair use, but you can appeal. And when you appeal, it enters into basically, it goes beyond YouTube, it becomes a legal issue. And then the person who copyright struck you has got 10 days to come back and tell you that they're taking you to court. Otherwise, YouTube puts the video back. Like the copyright strike disappears and YouTube puts the video back. That's what happens. But I can't even be bothered with the faff. I can't be bothered with the faff. Therefore, I'm just going to go back to this interview and carry on with this. But just saying that it's there if anybody wants to go and listen to it.
Put the death of the YouTuber on you guys.
Yeah, that's disgusting. And I would ask Doug Carter to listen to Jerry Holman's the audio tape interrogation.
That was absolutely freaking disgusting. Of the highest echelons of Indiana law enforcement to blame the defense for the suicide of a young man is disgusting. It was Jerry Holman who drove that man to suicide, allegedly. Harry Potter's beard, thank you for gifting 1 membership, and it's Mar R. Welcome, Mar R. Thank you so much, Harry Potter's beard. Go and check out the members area.
Or whatever you want to call it, of that young man who had a daughter and a wife, and where he lied to that young man. And, you know, because I have that, those audios as part of the contempt that was filed against us, another disgusting thing. And in it, Jerry Holman is basically saying, I can have you arrested. You know, instead of just saying, hey, we're just trying to get to the bottom of this. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't commit a crime. Maybe it was a wrong thing to do in terms of morally wrong. And it was not a great idea. And people are impacted by this. And, you know, you shouldn't have trusted these people that you
So basically, Jerry Holman scared this man so much that he felt his only option was to take his own life, to, I don't know, spare his family's shame or whatever. So if anybody needs to be blamed for it, then it's Jerry Holman. Yeah, shame on Holman. Yeah.
To or whatever. Instead of doing that to this young man, he lied to him and said, I'm going to call the judge right now. And, you know, she said that I can hold people in contempt. And I'd like for Doug Carter to watch that or listen to that and then reassess his, you know, what he says.
I don't think Jerry Holman should have a job right now. If Doug Carter, as what is he, superintendent of Indiana State Police, so he's Jerry Holman's boss, I don't think Doug Carter should come out and make really frivolous statements about the defense team, who had absolutely nothing, zero zilch, to do with that young man's suicide, and instead listen to one of his own employees and the way that he treats people when he's interrogating them. Let's do that. Jerry Holman should not be a lieutenant for the Indiana State Police. He should be at the job center looking for a new job.
Related to that death being on me. It's really disgusting. And we deserve better than that.
I've covered some big trials in Indianapolis. I covered Richmond Hill, but that was pre-social media. Social media was not much of a factor. Social media from day one saturated this. Have we entered into a new playing field, or what impact social media had on the pursuit of this investigation and of covering this trial?
It's fascinating in a way. You know, I came on later after Brad and Andy had already been through so much. And from the beginning, I decided I'm going to keep my head down. I'm not going to listen to any of this stuff because we've got 26 terabytes of data. We've got a lot of work to do. I think as we have discovered after the trial, that was probably a mistake because there were some things out on social media that were important on an evidentiary level. But I have a practice, Brad has a practice, Andy has a practice. We have clients who aren't Rick Allen. The manpower needed to do that would be tremendous. I think, you know, Andy and I have talked, I think you almost need to hire or have an expert in social media to be full-time filtering through these things because there's a lot of fluff, there's a lot of mistruths, a lot of lies, but there are some things that turned out probably were important to the case.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the gag order was a problem in that we should have probably had a hearing on that and asked for the parameters.
Judge Gull, asking Judge Gull for a hearing on the gag order. Can you imagine? Denied without a hearing.
Because one of the things that would happen is, like Jennifer saying, we would get, you know, podcasters, I suppose. Earlier.
Did he get told to retire for misrepresenting the Constitution? I think Doug Carter always planned to retire after this case was done. So he thinks the case is done. He's tried his best to cajole Rick Allen not to appeal. So his job is done.
I didn't know who was a podcaster and who wasn't. We'd get emails, and I don't even know what, or YouTube people. and they would provide information. And at the beginning, you're like a hungry dog, like, okay, well, that sounds really great. And then you kind of, oh, okay, that was kind of crazy. But then there would be these nuggets. But then you have to worry about, because then, you know, I would send an email and say, hey, thank you for this information. I really want to look into it and get back with you. And then the next thing you know, that's on somebody's YouTube channel. Okay. And so now you can't trust that. And then you want to develop relationships where they're giving you information, but you're telling them, hey, this is off record. I'm not, you know.
The case isn't closed, no, because Rick Allen is going to appeal. So as soon as Rick Allen puts that appeal in, you know, he's got his new team. So no, case isn't closed. Absolutely not. The tip line is still open, or at least it was on the day of the sentencing. The tip line is still open.
You know, I'm not telling you anything about the case, whatever this conversation is, even just that I'm communicating with you, that is off record. Those people that said that we wanted to create a narrative through the media and try this case through the media, that just isn't true. I mean, there was nothing that was ever said on record to anybody, you know, this is on record. And it was more about, can I get some information from you? But then we have the gag order to contend with. And by the way, you know, we had evidence that the gag order was violated, very strong evidence by the state.
Oh, let's talk about the gag order being violated by the state. Let's talk about how Barbara McDonald had the Odin report. So Murphy's 12-page Odin report with her live on Court TV one night. Let's talk about that. In September of 2023, Barbara McDonald had the Odin report with her
by law enforcement. And, you know, I asked I called the state police, their I guess internal affairs, whatever division or whatever it might be called, over a lot of things that I thought was wrong and happening. And I believe that was one of them. Is, are they going to investigate their own leaks? Are they going to investigate these other things? Jerry Holman wanting to charge me with a crime was another one.
This is just outrageous. Listen to this.
You know, that blew my mind. It's like a third world banana republic type of way to operate. Andy's going against me as of August 10th, 2023. It was a real difficult deposition for him, because I think up until that point in time,
I do have a great memory. I don't remember what I did yesterday, but I have a great memory for things like that.
Everybody was, Jerry Holman's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then, you know, we did conducted a deposition, and Jerry was getting, you know, kind of flambéed by, you know, questioning like, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? And the next thing I know, you know, he, you know, the leaks happened, and then he went down and talked to the special prosecutor and inquired about filing charges against me when there was no crime committed, you know.
Can you believe it? Jerry Holman tried to get Andrew Baldwin arrested. For what? Well, he's got a history of arresting people who've committed no crime. So if it's worked once for you, why not try it again? Unbelievable.
You know, I was, you know, if anything, I was the victim of somebody coming in and doing something. And it's kind of, if you just think about how crazy that is, that the lawyer representing a guy that you are, you know, going hard against, and you're trying to get him off the case. You know, I would say to Doug Carter, and I said this I think I said it to their own investigative unit that is supposed to look at these types of things, the state police's unit. I don't know who it was that I talked to. Seemed like a nice guy, but I haven't heard boo from them since. I don't know what became of anything that I told them. I was concerned about lost evidence. I was concerned.
It probably went straight to Jerry Holman, and he just had a giggle about it.
About a lot of different things that were going on in this case, and I went to their people there, and I haven't heard back. I've heard they've called me unethical. They've called the defense team unethical, and I have said this, and I will say this: we have an ethics panel here. I haven't done anything wrong, so I can say this with, you know, complete, like,
all he's guilty of is being a damn good lawyer. That's what he's guilty of. Where's the crime in that?
No worries at all. File something. Everything that I have said is backed up with facts, emails, depositions, tape recordings, or whatever. Those, to the degree that the law enforcement has taken things personally, you know, I backed up everything that I said. They're, on the other hand, just going out with ad hominem, you know, they're unethical. And file it then. File something. And
yeah, file it. Let's all of us have a laugh. File it.
Let the ethics, the disciplinary commission figure something out. And I'm not worried about it. I'm just not worried about it because we didn't do anything. I'm not perfect. I don't do everything right.
You do a lot right. To that extent, I was really troubled by.
You can see how emotional he gets. You can see how this has eaten him up. I mean, Andrew Baldwin is an incredibly strong person to have seen this through and then wants to see it through round 2, despite all of the stuff that they've tried to do to him. Like, they've tried to wreck his career, and he has got so many supporters amongst, you know, the legal fraternity in Indiana because he's a damn good lawyer. And the cops just, and Nick McClelland was shit scared of him. They were scared of him. That's why they had to try and get rid of him. Him and Brad Rosie, you know, they thought, oh shit, these guys, you know, they're going for us hard. They could win this, and we're going to look stupid. Absolute, complete and total farce. And anybody who cannot see through this, I've not got the words. There isn't a word in the English language that will adequately convey to you how misguided you are. Just open your eyes, open your mind. There's something seriously wrong here. Seriously wrong.
By the theme on December 20th of the defense counsel being unethical, that, you know, Brad and Andy's.
Oh, the tentacles. Oh, yeah. This case has many tentacles. He did say that.
Somehow had something to do with that man's death. And this is by our top Indiana law enforcement. And if people believe this, you've now placed targets on our backs. And if something would happen to us, who's going to investigate?
Yeah.
The state police, the very people who put the targets on our backs.
That is a very scary prospect. She's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. The Indiana State Police did put targets on their backs. Whether anybody will be stupid enough to try to do anything to them is another matter. But then again, we do have a lot of nutcases in this world. But look at her face. Look at the conviction she said that with.
What new evidence has come up since this case is wrapped up?
Can't talk about it. Yeah, she's looking at me.
Can you? All right, then let's talk about, if you can't give me the specifics, talk about the process.
Mm-hmm.
Have you either continued to investigate, or new evidence or new witnesses have come forward ever since the completion of the trial?
We'll be filing, I think, a motion to correct errors, to clean up the record on some things. Once that's done, the judge can either not rule on it and it's deemed denied in a certain period of time. She can deny it without a hearing. She can set it for a hearing. Once that's completed, then we have the notice of appeal to file.
If you were the appellate attorneys, what would you be hanging your hat on? Would you be hanging it on the evidence in the case or the judge's administration of the case?
They're the experts. There's 2 really terrific appellate lawyers that I'm so happy are on this case. They are unbelievably smart. They are terrific writers, and you have to be great persuasive writers, and I will let them make that call. I mean, we will work with them for sure in terms of our thoughts and so forth, but ultimately that's going to be up to them.
I'm assuming, though.
And for those who've just come in, I shared this at the beginning. So this is a court filing. The acceptance of appointment and formal notice of appointment of outside counsel. So Amy E. Carrazos, public defender in Indiana, acknowledges receipt of certification that the above captioned court has been unable to provide local counsel to represent the indigent defendant in the above captioned cause. So therefore accepts appointment to represent Richard M. Allen. I hereby appoint Stacey R. Uliana and Mark Lehman. So they're outside of Carroll County. That's basically what it means, is they didn't have the people in Carroll County, so they've appointed these 2 people. These are excellent. Well, I don't know Stacey. I don't know anything about Stacey, but Mark Lehman You can go back and watch Mark Lehman in action. I did play it. It is on this channel somewhere. Mark Lehman was the appellant lawyer who dealt with the Supreme Court of Indiana when Richard Allen's case went to the Supreme Court of Indiana, when Judge Gull unceremoniously disqualified Brad and Andy, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Indiana. Mark Lehman is the guy who spoke, and he did so good. He did so well. So if you want a refresher on how good Mark Lehman is, go back to loads of people have got it. If you don't want to watch it on my channel, that's fine. Loads of other channels have got it. But it's there in its entirety on this channel if you want it. I don't know what the title is. It's a live stream. It will be something like the Supreme Court of Indiana, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, and it's from January of 2024. So that kind of cuts down your search a little bit. So yeah, they are going to be Rick Allen's lawyers for the appeal. The reason why Brad and Andy and Jennifer can't be his lawyers for the appeal is because they are not appeals lawyers. Let the experts do their job. These guys are appeals lawyers. Brad, Andy, and Jennifer are trial lawyers. So that's why. But what Brad and Andy and presumably Jennifer do want to do is pick up where they left off. If the appeal's successful and Rick Allen does get a new trial, then they want to be his attorneys again for trial number 2.
So you've got not only if there's new evidence, correct errors comes up, does correcting errors also extend to what the judge's rulings said, or the way she ruled, or often issue an order without a hearing?
Judge's rulings are the judge's rulings. She's not going to go back and rethink those now. We have some things in the record we need to clean up about.
And some new things and things that we've discovered since. And yeah.
Let's talk about the lies that Brad Weber told under oath. Let's talk about that. Maybe that's something that is on their radar. CW's going to do the horses. Going to do the horses. Love from your wench with a wrench. Very good.
Yeah. Well, you got 26 terabytes of data that was disclosed. You have, we had pictures of bodies, and we with no context. Just filtering through that. But you're so busy filtering through that in the investigation. There's again all of these social media, all of this stuff on the internet, and once you start diving through that and validating it as attorneys, we can't say, hey, I saw this on an Apple discussion group and I think it's admissible, and introduce it. You've got some good faith that you need to do to make sure that this is proper evidence. Pete, we're still, I presume Andy is, I know I am, getting emails from people. I spent a lot of late nights sitting right here digging down, emails from people, facts that they're putting forth in that context. It seems, wow, we need to look at this. And then you realize.
I think that's the kind of job I'd be good at. Like sitting there in a room on my own with the lights off, digging through mountains and mountains of discovery. I think I could do that job.
Okay, that was a dead end. So we're still getting emails from people about different suspects.
Emails, however, I'm not so good at.
Different documentary evidence out there that we're tracking down.
And another thing is then when a trial is actually happening, and it's like a collision between live theater and improv, because you really don't know what's going to happen up on that stand. And there was a lot of that happening in this trial, but you don't know what people are going to say. You have if you conduct depositions and so forth, you might have an idea, but then they may not even stick with what they've said in the past. So one of the things that could have happened that might, we might be looking into is what was said by some of the witnesses on the stand that was unexpected, and what evidence did we unearth to kind of prove or show that what they said unexpectedly is not accurate? Because in real time,
one of those things could well be Brad Weber unexpectedly taking the stand for the state, saying that he passed by in his white van at 2:30, when actually he told the cops in the early days, and his mother was out there on the mean streets of social media saying, oh, my son Brad, you know, passed by at 3:30. But Brad Webber told the cops, the cop that Judge Gull would not allow to give testimony at the trial. By the way, let's talk about that. The cop who took Brad Webber's testimony back in 2017 now works in Texas. And because he is, I don't know what health issue he's got, but he couldn't, and it was election time, his job and his health meant that he couldn't fly from Texas to Indiana, to give testimony at the trial in person. So they asked whether he could give testimony via Zoom. And she said no. So I don't know, maybe there's proof about what Brad Webber actually said in 2017. And it absolutely wasn't that he passed by in his white van at 2:30. So that's another thing that breaks the state's theory. Yet another thing.
Time you can't necessarily find these things out. You listen to it and you're like, wow, that was unexpected. Now what can we do? And then maybe you look at the evidence in a different way, or you find out you get your investigators on it, and then they start searching for why that person's answer changed and how it impacts the case.
I think it was huge for the case. I think it was huge that whatever the state said to Brad Webber to get him to come and lie under oath, whatever they said to him, was he lying under oath, or did he lie in 2017? So if he lied in 2017, why did he lie in 2017? And why has he decided to tell the truth now? Or are both answers lies? And absolutely, it's untrue. What the state said, that only the killer would know about the white van, is absolutely untrue. As I said before, I knew about the white van, and I'm 4,000 and odd miles away. I knew about the white van that passed by. We all thought it passed by at 3:30, but I was absolutely aware of it. Brad Webber's white van, passed by for some 4,000 and some miles away. And I wasn't there at the crime scene. No, I'm not the killer of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, but I knew about the white van.
Did we learn more about the investigative technique and the investigative process simply because there was such a spotlight on this case, or the things you saw behind the scene with what you identified as the holes and the shortcomings in the investigation? Those are common in investigations. This one really sticks out because the mistakes were manifold and so multiplied, either because there were a lot more mistakes or because we just paid more attention to this than we do a typical dope dealer shooting in Indianapolis.
There, before I ever got involved, Brad and Andy had done a fantastic job of digging down on a lot of the behind the scenes things. I think, part of the issue was 5.5 years had passed before they honed in on Rick Allen. And I think at the beginning, everyone was doing the best they could to find the person who murdered 2 girls. But too many Indians, not enough chiefs. So all this information, volumes and volumes of information is coming in that isn't being followed up on, and just because of the volume, right? I mean, they had over 14,000 tips. There were, in the FBI database, there's over 60,000 entries. And so, I think legitimately mistakes were made. Probably if you wanted to go back and do it in a wiser way, there would have been more of a logical flow of how we're going to handle all of this information. But, at some point, they became very myopic. They became very, all right, we have somebody. And even though, as of the last day of trial, or during the trial when Doug Carter testified, the Indiana State Police website on their homepage was asking for tips. So if they believe Richard Allen is
Yeah, it is. It is. They were asking for tips.
a lone actor, why are you asking for tips?
Yeah, Kevin Murphy testified on August the 1st at our preliminary hearing that they always said it was 2 to 3 people, as many as 5 to 6. It was never one. And then all of a sudden they changed their narrative to, no, it is only one. And that just isn't accurate. It's not, I don't think it's honest. I just wish you could just be honest and just say, if you're going to try to hang the hat on Rick Allen, just say, you know what, we were wrong about the 2 to 3 or the 5 to 6. It did seem like it took a lot of people to do this. And I guess we were just wrong on that. But they have to just say, no, we always thought it was one. No, we considered the other, but we always thought that one was a possibility. No, they didn't, because if the crime scene does not lend itself to one person, 5'5" Rick Allen is who they're claiming. The crime scene does not lend itself to one person in the middle of the afternoon on a sunny day, doing everything that was accomplished at that crime scene. And it doesn't make sense that even their blood spatter person, his testimony, could be interpreted as there had to be multiple people there, because the lack of drag marks means that somebody had to pick, the body up and move it to a different location. And there was no drag marks, and that just kind of gets glossed over. There was multiple, the evidence is, in my opinion, just very strong. There was multiple people involved.
At the sentencing, Nicholas McLeland said Richard Allen is a danger to do it again.
That's what he has to say as a prosecutor, and I get that. So I presume he believes it. I presume that. So
presumes he did it the first time too, that there's a conviction. Rich Allen was 50 years old when he was arrested.
Yeah.
Never charged with a crime before that, never convicted of a crime. There is nothing in his background that would suggest that he could do something like this.
Is Richard Allen's life in danger behind bars?
Well, in my experience, Russ, here's what happens once there's a sentence. A sentence is handed down. Then the person returns to the jail, usually the county jail, almost always the county jail in the county where their case was. And they sit there for a number of days, maybe even weeks, sometimes even months, waiting for the Department of Corrections to come pick them up and take them to what's called the RDC, or Regional Diagnostic Center. And that's where a battery of tests are run. And they're trying to determine which is the best facility for this person to go to. And that takes 30, 45 days, typically a number of weeks. And I usually tell my client's family, like, you're not gonna be able to talk to him while he's at the RDC, count on it, 3 to 4 weeks minimum. But yet in this case, Richard Allen was taken on the day of sentencing to RDC. And then I believe it was 6 days later, was taken back to Westville.
Yeah, I talked about that in a video yesterday. So for those that didn't see it, I did a short video yesterday talking about this exact thing. Richard Allen was fast-tracked through the normal process. So the normal process is they go to the RDC, which is an assessment center. So, they have loads of psychologists, and, they test them and they place them in the most appropriate facility for them. And what Andy Baldwin said on the Defense Diaries interview is that he assumed that Rick Allen would go to Newcastle. Not Newcastle in the northeast of England, but Newcastle, Indiana, because they have a mental health, a bigger mental health area, unit, I don't know what you would call it. But no. Rick Allen gets shipped straight back to Westville. He's fast-tracked through the system back to Westville. Now, as a convicted kid killer. Broken Gothbell lives near Newcastle in the northeast of England. Walla is a psychiatrist at Westville. She isn't. She's not. She doesn't work at Westville anymore. She's been banned. And her license is being investigated right now, but she was taken away from Westville, but she's not a psychiatrist, she's a psychologist. Different qualification. So no, she's not there anymore.
And so you ask, is he in danger? I don't know why he's there. Can we just have some common sense? Can we just, at least have the appearance that people care? I understand that he's been convicted now of killing 2 girls, But with everything and all this attention going on, the intentionality, the boldness, if you will, of sending him back to Westville instead of Newcastle, where they have a mental health kind of wing. Can you just try to at least look, you know, like the
mental health wing? Thank you. Yeah, at least try to look like you're doing things right. They don't care. They've got no shame. So it worked for them the first time. They sent him, you know, psychotic the first time. So now that he's planning to appeal, they've got him back there. They're going to do it all over again. They're going to do it all over again to convince him that he shouldn't appeal. That's what they're doing. Mark my words. That is absolutely what they are doing. Yeah, the control unit. Yeah.
The appearance of being fair or something. I don't get it. Maybe there's great reasons why they sent him up there. So
there is reasons. Absolutely, there's reasons. Maybe Andy doesn't want to say what they are, but I'll say what they are. That's what I believe anyway.
Quickly. But now it's my understanding they're not even allowed to talk to him. Family can't talk to him for a few weeks. Is that accurate?
DOC policy is after 2 weeks. When they're at the facility, after 2 weeks, you should have access to a phone. You should have access to his tablet. Kathy tells us they told her 6 to 8 weeks. I don't know why.
Yes, so they can work on him. So they can work on him to, you know, get him to say that he's not going to appeal. Oh, we'll let you speak to your wife. We'll let you have a visit with Kathy as long as you say you are not going to appeal.
They consistently treat Richard Allen differently than any other person charged with or convicted of a crime in this state. Westville wasn't able to keep him safe when he was there the first time. By their own doing, they made him unsafe. By their failure to properly diagnose, their failure to properly treat, the failure to keep him safe under his conditions of confinement, they put him at danger with his mental health. And there's no reason to think, because they're continuing to treat him differently than any other person in the state of Indiana, there's no reason to think they're going to do anything different this time. And now he's being guarded by the very people we cross-examined in court. That's a problem.
Yes. The Odin guards are still there, as far as we know. Can you imagine what his life is like right now? Can you imagine?
Yeah. When I sat there and I watched the jury, and of course during the sentencing, the judge made remarks that she felt Richard Allen had been rolling his eyes during the trial at her. But I was watching the jury.
Listen, I'd been rolling my eyes during the trial if I'd been Rick Allen. Honest question, what do the numbers besides people's names mean? It means how long you've been a member. So if you're a brand new member, you get noob. If you've been a member a month, you have 1. If you've been a member between 2 and 5 months, you get 2 to 5, and so on and so forth, until you've been a member for 24 months, and then you get your OG badge. So that's what they mean.
Watch him or watch the evidence, and you know, you could feel there was a lot of uneasiness on that jury, whether it was directed at the evidence or him. I don't know. I mean, there were people looking at the clock saying, I got to get out of this courtroom. What did you pick up from watching the jury or the way they watched your client?
CC member for 16 months. Thank you so much. Yeah, noob. If you're brand new, you get noob.
You know, Richard, that's always a tough thing. We talked about that in jury selection with the jury. Like, you're going to be here a long time, whoever is chosen. You're going to be looking right at him during testimony, when people are testifying. How's Rick reacting to it during crime scene photos being posted and so forth. And if you're innocent, you know, he's a human being, and therefore he can react like we all would react to upsetting crime scene photos, upsetting testimony, hearing, you know, the grandmother testify about losing her granddaughter. That's going to be upsetting. And so what's the jury supposed to, should he cry? Should he not cry? So we covered that in jury selection, and hopefully, you know, with the idea that they would go back there and say, that should not be something that we factor in. So I hope that they didn't factor anything into that. I mean, I sat next to Rick most of the trial, and what I told him to do was write out, we gave him yellow pad after yellow pad, and he would just write out the testimony. He would write out the testimony. And then when there was photos, I asked him to put it into 4 quadrants and start with the upper left and just describe detail on what's on there, because I wanted him engaged. Because if he's not engaged, that might say something to them. If he is engaged, but it's very complicated and difficult to know what to do. By the way, Jerry Holman was sitting right next to us and kept looking at Rick's notes, and that was very bothersome to me, to the point that I had to say, Jerry, stop looking at his notes. You know, he said that he wasn't, but whatever. I mean,
that's unbelievable.
I mean, It's ridiculous.
I could believe, absolutely. Jerry Holman looking at Rick Allen's notes. Oh dear, that's what a sad. I bet it was like a habit that Jerry Holman had at school. You know, he'd be looking over at the person sat next to him for their notes because, you know, he didn't understand anything and he was so behind. So it's probably just like force of habit for Jerry Holman to do that, but just absolutely ridiculous. Phenomenal. Member for 17 months. Thank you so much. You've not got long to go until you're an OG. You've not got long.
The question is if he did it. And the jury said he did. What's he doing on the bridge that day? The other question is, what are the girls doing on the bridge that day? Why didn't the defense bring up all this Anthony Shot stuff that maybe that was their motivation to be on the bridge that day?
They weren't allowed to. Come on, interviewer, keep up. They weren't allowed to. Look at Jennifer's face. Look at her face there. She's like rolling her eyes. Andrew Baldwin. She's got a proper side eye on. Yeah, it's like, yeah, why did we not bring up the Anthony Shot stuff? Oh, yeah, it's because we weren't allowed. Because I'm going to take a screenshot of that. I'm going to use that on a thumbnail at some point. Yeah. The reason why they didn't bring it up is because, as well as Odin and all the Odin people, they weren't allowed to bring up Ron Logan. They weren't allowed to bring up Kegan Kline or Tony Kline. They were banned. They couldn't mention it. Thank you, Jean, member for 18 months. 18 months. If you weren't cheating, you weren't typing.
Kegan Kline was the subject of the motion in limine. We weren't allowed to.
Yep. And we weren't allowed to talk about that. Yeah, for those who say that we don't have heart and we.
Why the jump cut there? What did he say there that Fox News cut out? Now, to be fair, there weren't many jump cuts in this interview. There weren't many. But what did they cut out there? I'm interested to know.
We don't care. They weren't in here when we're crying, looking at crime scene photos or getting upset or getting emotional about the thought of, having to depose the families. I thought, I think one of the Holman or Carter said that.
Yeah, it's sad that many of us are concerned for Rick's safety right now. Yeah, I mean, look. You don't expect prisons to be a holiday camp. I don't want prisons to be a holiday camp. I don't want them to be a holiday camp in my country. I don't want them to be a holiday camp in the United States. However, what you do expect is that people are kept safe. You do expect that they are given, food, that they are given somewhere to sleep, that they are given a level of respect that goes along with the fact that, a human being deserves a level of respect and that they are kept safe. What you don't expect is for them to be tortured, to be put into solitary confinement for months and months on end and to be driven to the point of psychosis. That's what you do not expect. Just saying.
We disrespected the family, I think, or some words to that effect. Read the depositions of the families that when I took their depositions. I think Brad and I and Jennifer, I'm sure she participated in some of those depositions, thought we were very respectful. I thought we were very nice. We were trying to be as considerate to their feelings, yet trying to find out, for example, they didn't take Kelsey's phone and do a phone dump because to help the timeline, to help establish the timeline. And that's real tricky because you want to talk about that as a deficiency in the investigation, yet you don't want it to appear as if you're going after Kelsey German, and which I wasn't. And so you have to do your job, yet you have to be. And so we tried to.
Yeah, appropriate medical care. Yes, for both physical and mental problems. Yes, absolutely.
Do it respectfully. And I understand. Listen, when you're us, they have to not like you. When they have to think. I understand they don't have to, but I understand why they would, and I don't hold that against them. I really don't.
Andy was incredibly nice and delicate in the deposition to the family members, probably more than I would have been. But look, I have children. One of the hardest things in this case, you know, something hits differently, was I was going through all the cell phone data in all the teens and thinking about those girls.
Exactly. Who are we as humans if we think torture is acceptable? Absolutely. And it doesn't matter about the circumstance. Torture is unacceptable.
Parents, every 15 minutes, they're peeing that phone, and you get your hopes up. I mean, I watch my kids on, you know, they find my iPhone, whatever, because I worry about them. And I mean, that I was in Bloomington for a mom's weekend, up late working on this case, going through those, crying, you know, thinking about we're humans and we're nice people. Well, not everyone thinks I'm nice. Everyone thinks he's nice.
No,
but
well,
regardless, here's the thing. There is no justice for Abby Williams and Liberty German if you convict the wrong person.
Absolutely. And this is what some people cannot wrap their head around. And unfortunately, I strongly suspect that some of those jurors might be thinking along those lines as well. Maybe not the juror that's interviewed by the murder shits, but I don't know. I don't know.
All of that does is double the tragedy, double the injustice. If Richard Allen is not guilty, there are still killers out there. That's not justice. Putting Richard Allen in a torturous condition isn't justice. I think it's not justice even if he did it, but you know, this isn't justice. And that's what we dedicate our lives to.
It isn't justice. It's an absolute shit show. I've lost the ability to use appropriate words to describe what this is. It's unbelievable. Had you a member for 20 months. Andy really is a decent and caring gentleman. He is. I think they all are very intelligent and they do their job very well. But ultimately, what she's saying right now is absolutely 100% the truth, that you cannot convict somebody and think, right, there you go, wash your hands of it, job done, the girls have justice. If there are still killers out there, that's still, you know, I would say exactly the same thing. This is not justice. If Rick Allen had some bit part in it, you know, Rick Allen was involved somewhere and there were other people along with him, I would still absolutely say the same, that this is not justice for Abby and Libby because there are still killers out there. As it happens, I don't think Rick Allen had anything to do with this. I absolutely do not. That's just my opinion based on studying this case for however long and drawing that conclusion that there are people out there who are much more likely to be the killers than Rick Allen ever was. Thank you, Carol, for the £5. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
That's what we are obviously passionate about. And we can be zealous advocates for our client and be mindful and respectful and mournful for the families and the friends of Abby and Libby. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I think if my guess is, and I could be totally wrong here, is that the families are somewhat, if not very much so, influenced by what law enforcement say. And law enforcement obviously has such a deep-seated, I don't know if I want to say hatred, but a deep-seated issues with us as a defense lawyers. I don't know that anybody's ever gone up against them, you know, as vigorously as we have. And maybe they're
not. No, they probably haven't. And they were scared. Andy Baldwin and Brad Rosie scared them. And this is how they reacted. They were scared.
Not used to that, but I worry that the family has been influenced. There's a case recently in Indiana, by the way, that it was a family, a guy. I wish I had the case, and we can talk about it now, and maybe you can look it up. But this happened within the last year, where a guy was in jail or prison. He said, "I'm innocent." The defense pointed to another suspect. The families believed he did it. Law enforcement convinced the families that he did it, and then years later, it was confirmed that he did not do it. Yet the other guy did it, and now that family has aligned with the defense lawyers, and you know, and they're I think they're suing the police, saying you led us astray, you know, and that kind of hit home to me.
Whatever happened to your client's 2017?
Good. I hope. I absolutely hope that you know, when all of this shakes out, if there's a second trial and it's done properly this time and the relevant evidence is allowed to be presented, I hope the families realise that they have been led down the garden path here by Carter and his cronies and Holman.
What happened to mine? What happened to yours? I mean, you know,
Well, he had 23 devices, so
well, that's not
not
really accurate, but some of those were not.
Well, I mean, he's got chargers, he's got pagers, he's got other stuff, but he just seems like a guy that's got a lot of stuff. And then if you ask the question, whatever happened to his 2017 phone, I don't know. Did anybody ever look at his phone records from February and March of that year to see who he was calling before and after? Because if he had any unusual phone calls, or it's the same 5 people he's always talking.
That would have been great. I mean,
well, why did you do it?
We did.
And what'd you find?
He called his, I think he called his benefits manager at CVS.
Yeah.
So there are no phone calls on there to any alleged co-conspirators.
No. And they looked for that. They compared.
If there was anything whatsoever on Rick Allen's phone records, we would have heard it from the state at the trial.
You know, the mutual friends on social media, in terms of Rick and Kathy, in you know, shockingly, the only mutual connection was, I think, a pizza place or something, if I recall. But yeah, they looked at that.
And remember, Delphi is a very small town. Has it got something like 3,000 inhabitants, something like that? So I would imagine that if you want takeout pizza, there ain't probably going to be an awful lot of choice. So the fact that the Allens and the Germans or the Williams use the same pizza place, I don't think is a connection. All right.
We looked at
Richard,
there's nothing there.
Richard provided his phone, and they took the EIN off of that. So where is it?
It did. On February the 16th, on 18th, whenever it was, that he met Dan Dollard, he gave Dan Dollard his phone, right? He gave him his phone. And Dan took down that, you know, unique identifier number. So he wasn't scared to hand over his phone to law enforcement. The fact that he no longer has it now is irrelevant. The records are still there. The records all still there.
The phone. Well, did he get rid of the car that they said that he used? Did he get rid of the clothing that they said that he used that I never saw admitted into evidence, by the way? Did he get rid of, did he move? Did he leave? Did he continue to stay there? I mean,
look, he had the same car, right? The law enforcement, you know, in taking Rick Allen's Sig Sauer P226, say that's the gun that expelled the unspent round at the crime scene. So according to the state, he didn't get rid of that firearm. He had clothes that looked like bridge guys. Not that they brought those into evidence at all, saying these are the clothes that were used at the crime scene. Why? Because there's no evidence on any of Rick Allen's clothes that he was ever there at the crime scene. And he worked on a front-facing job. He wasn't, you know, hidden away in some little, you know, basement somewhere for his job or in an office. He was a tech like the, you know, at CVS. You know, he was there, front-facing, serving the public for 5.5 years, right in the middle of Delphi. So he wasn't hiding, was he? No.
It just doesn't add. I mean, I'm a guy that has had how many cell phones in my life? I couldn't. One's here and one's there, and some are hither and there. So.
All right. In your post-mortem, ever since November 11th, did you guys ever sit around and say, well, you know what? Maybe if we just said this one thing, maybe it would have turned it around, or was it just a tidal wave of evidence? And if so, what was that one thing, that one approach that you left unexplored or unmaximized that maybe would have turned it? I
don't think that's the way trial lawyers think, is that way. I think it's more of, did we, in a more general way, did we lawyers focus on the right things? It's not as much as I should have asked that question. Now, that's a part of the process in the postmortems. Should I, you know, the craft of what we do is more broad than that. And so it's like, should we have focused more on the timeline? you know, that would be a thought of mine, is because if they hung their hat on the confessions, and Brad Rosie, by the way, he's not here, and I just want to say, I don't know whether this will air or not, but Brad Rosie had the most difficult job of all the lawyers, because he had to deal with, you know, watching the videos. He had to deal with watching the videos of Richard Allen, you know, being treated the way that he was treated, you know, and putting that all together and doing all that, and also the ballistics. And Brad just did a terrific job of that. But, you know, when I analyze it, and I mean, one thing I think is the timeline was so problematic for the state that maybe if I had to look back at it, I'd say maybe we should have focused more on that, because that would, the so-called confessions, if the timeline doesn't work, then nothing else matters.
Absolutely. And the aspects of the timeline, I mean, the whole day is a problem for the state. However, please, 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 Andy, look at the phone data and look at the state's theory. Because the two don't match. The two just do not work. They don't work. They absolutely don't work. Attack the timeline.
And so that would be one thing that I was thinking about, just in a more generic way. It wasn't like I should have asked that question, or I should have asked that question. It's like presentation. I mean, I did the opening statement, and so I did a lot of hard thinking about that. You know, should I have done something different on that? Because that's the first opportunity for a jury to kind of hear how the evidence might unfold, and what we are going to focus on. So I did a lot of soul searching.
Yeah, a large visual timeline. Like the state says these are the facts. So have on one side, this is what the state says, and this is what we know. And this is what we know from data. And I think that would be very, very convincing for a jury, you know, in terms of keeping reasonable doubt in their minds.
Searching about the opening statement and things like that. It's more broad than what you're talking about.
Did the jury get it wrong, or they came to the only answer that was available to them?
I think that there was plenty of reasonable doubt. I think the headphones in and the headphones out blows their theory apart to pieces. You know, the fact that not one witness identified Richard Allen. I don't know what the jury hung their hats on. You know, they came back and...
I think I know what the jury hung their hats on. Emotion. I think that's what did it. Two little girls, and then that closing statement by Nick McClelland, the very last thing that they heard from the state was that the girls were heroes and they solved their own murders. So Libby, in taking the video of Bridge Guy, and he also managed to make Abby a hero as well by saying that Abby managed to hide the phone under herself, which, I'm sorry, look, Nick McClelland, you know, do an experiment. Stab yourself in the neck, right, whilst you're lying down, and then try to get your friend's cell phone, hide it under your body while you're bleeding out, right? You're bleeding out. Hide it under your body, under a shoe. So navigate, right, as you're bleeding out, how are you going to hide that phone? You're going to have to put the phone under your body, and then you're going to put a shoe on top of your phone underneath your body. So the shoe is going to be sandwiched between the phone that's not your phone, it's your friend's phone. So you've got to work out where that phone is as you're bleeding out. Okay. So you've got to sandwich then the shoe between your body as you're dying and the phone. So Nick McClelland, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating that, that would be fantastic. Great.
Very intently listened to statements in the video. I would be really concerned if the state of our justice is that the jury listened to the video of Bridge Guy and listened to Brian Harshman testify that Richard Allen is the voice of Bridge Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Harshman has no background training experience to make that comment. You can do a voice analysis. He didn't do it. And so that would be disappointing.
Why didn't you guys do voice analysis? If they didn't do it, why didn't you do it to disprove?
We don't have funds.
Yeah, there's
and
that.
And when I say they could have done voice analysis, let me back up and say, I mean, how many seconds of Rich Guy's voice was on that video?
I think,
yeah, it's going to be completely unreliable. You know, you've got this guys down the hill. I mean, he may have said some other words as well, because we haven't seen the full 43 seconds. We've only heard 4 words, guys down the hill. Oh, look, bridge guy used guys for 2 girls. Oh, no. So, guys down the hill. And how are you going to say that that's definitely Rick Allen's voice? So I would be very sad if that's what they used, despite everything else. Well, yeah, Adolf, you make a good point. Abby was clean. So how did Abby have no blood on her person? I mean, we don't know what was underneath her, to be honest. All right, she could have bled onto the ground underneath her. But you're right. Abby did look very, very clean. She did look very, very clean. Unlike Libby, who didn't. And I have seen one of those crime scene photos. So I do know what Libby looked like compared to what Abby looked like. But because Abby was dressed, it's more difficult to ascertain whether there was any blood from Abby at that scene. So stab yourself in the neck, and you don't necessarily have to be bleeding out. You can just stab yourself in the neck. You are going to bleed. You are going to bleed. Right? You're going to bleed. But do all of those steps that I said, and see how you go with it. All right. Be a hero, Nick. Be a hero and do it.
I think that they tried. I think they did try. If I remember, they did try voice analysis, and it's kind of a, it's kind of a field that's not, you can't really trust it.
Well, even with really good audio, you've always got the subjectivity of voice analysis. I mean, yeah, you can kind of electronically compare, frequencies and blah, blah, blah. But there's always going to be 2 sides. You're always going to be able to get an expert who will counteract that particular piece of analysis. It's not like it's absolutely objective. And where you've got just 4 words that have been enhanced. So, bridge guy, we don't even hear bridge guy's voice unenhanced. We've got a bleeder. You definitely would have a bleeder. Where's all the blood? Who knows?
So I don't think that ultimately, I agree with Jennifer. One thing I want to say about Brian Harshman is, the van was a big deal for those that paid close attention to the case. And Harshman stood up on the stand under oath and said, that Richard Allen would be the only person that would know about it. And it wasn't out there in the public domain. And that's just not accurate. I don't know.
No, it's not accurate. As I said before, I knew about the white van. I didn't murder those girls. I'm 4,500 miles away, but I knew about the white van.
Whether, he knew that or not. But a quick Google search would find that there was 20 to 25 just quickly of van being out there in the public domain between 2017 and 2022, which means Dr. Walla, who was...
I would imagine there's more than that. I would imagine that if you looked on Reddit, there's going to be more than 25 threads about the white van. Just on Reddit. If you scoured social media and looked at all the Facebook groups, you'd have hundreds of mentions of the white van. You've probably got hundreds of mentions of the white van in the Facebook groups that Monica Waller was a member of, whilst she was Richard Allen's psychologist while he was being tortured in Westville.
A Delphi fanatic could have gone to Rick. I don't know whether Rick ever said anything about a van. I don't know whether Waller was not telling the truth about that. She destroyed her notes. And it wasn't audio taped. By the way, can we talk about lawyers being videotaped while they're trying to have a consultation with their lawyer? Can I talk about that for a second? I mean, we're in Westville, and these 2 guys come in with a camcorder, and then they require, for us to even have a consultation with Richard, they require him to face them so that they can read his lips on video, 6-8 feet away. I don't know. It was probably about that. And we had no choice if we wanted to talk to him. Folks, that's just not, that's not normal. All right. And nobody seems to care. It's bizarre.
Oh, people care. People care, Andy. The world, believe it or not, Andy, is watching. Absolutely, people care. Maybe not the people who have the power, but people care. People care. What's that? Thank you. Hold on. Got a super chat here that it's gone by. Let me just. Thank you, Michelle. I'm such a snob about your channel. Working on that. I don't know what you mean by that, Sistina, but thank you so much for the $5. I don't know what you mean by a snob, but okay. Thank you.
Or, we just had to sit and take it if we wanted to have a consultation with our client. And nobody has explained why that was done. Richard Allen was in handcuffs and so forth. And if it was for our safety or something, that doesn't make sense. They could have, even just being there was a problem, let alone videotaping it. It's outrageous, but nobody seems to care. Nobody has done anything about it. Nobody said anything about it. Can somebody do something?
It's the most outrageous thing. It really is. Like a flaming camcorder. And the guards sitting there. My brother Rosie was talking about it last night on Defense Diaries. They had the door open. Like Rick Allen is in like chains, like can't even have a drink. Andy Baldwin had to give him a drink, like hold the bottle of water up to his lips. Andy Baldwin literally had to like treat Rick Allen like a baby because Rick Allen's arms were so strapped that he couldn't even have a drink on his own. So there's no safety concern here. The door is open and there's a guard sat right outside the door and they weren't allowed to shut the door. So as well as Rick being in chains in the most secure unit in any Department of Corrections in Indiana, with the guard outside the door, they also have to videotape him. No, not for safety. It's so that they can go through it to find out what the lawyers are talking about. Then they can feed that in to the prosecutor.
About that, I know from, I just remember I have memories of them being behind us videotaping. And so you're like, trying to talk as quietly as you can. And I mean, nothing that would be bad for us. It's just us trying to explain to Richard, part of it had to be, here's where we're at, here's what's going on. We're trying to assess how.
What about client, client counsel confidentiality? What about that? They are entitled to that. Doesn't matter what they're talking about. They are entitled to that. Kathy Shank is a real life superhero. Okay.
With it, he is, because it was happening, after the first round of confessions. I mean, we were with Richard within hours of that, and he was a completely different person. I mean, he's completely different. I had seen him on March let's see, I think it was March 24th. I had been to Westville, and it was like on a Friday, and I met with Rick, and you can see him deteriorating to some degree from November of 2022 to March, but it wasn't really anything what I would label as crazily significant. He was depressed and so forth, but then on April the 3rd, we went up there and he was a different person. He was just a totally different person, behaving completely differently. And that's when they started videotaping, and they wouldn't let us bring our phones in anymore. I mean, it was,
All right. So they got him to a point where he was confessing. They got him to a point where he was so ground down, so broken that he was losing grip of reality, and he was having periods of psychosis when he would confess, make incriminating statements. Then they start camcordering so that they can prove if Rick Allen is making incriminating statements to his lawyers. That's what they were doing. I bet you any money.
I don't know what to say about it.
All right. Is there anything else folks need to know or understand about your defense of your client, the verdict, and where the appeals process goes from here?
I would like to address for a moment the statement made by, I believe it was Doug Carter at the press conference on December 20th, where he said, justice has been done, and if you don't like justice in this country, then leave. I have a moral, ethical, real problem with that. Richard Allen has a right to an appeal, and it was very disturbing throughout the sentencing, throughout the victim impact statements, at the press conference, these pleas to him not to appeal. If you have a secure conviction, if you have a righteous conviction, you don't need to do that. He has a constitutional right to appeal his conviction. And to tell people not to question that is dangerous.
He also had a constitutional right to speak up and give a statement at his sentencing and chose not to do that.
What are you going to say, Russ?
Yeah.
I'm not guilty. I didn't do this. You know, I don't know that he rolled his eyes to Judge Gull. I mean, I'll take her at her word. I was sitting next to him. I didn't see it, but I wasn't looking at his face. But, you know, why would you not roll your eyes at a verdict that is unjust, that is untrue? I mean, if that happened, and I'm not doubting Judge Gull, I'm guessing it did happen, but yeah. I mean, for the top law enforcement officer to say the things that Jennifer just described about you can leave the country, again, that's some third world banana republic type of way of thinking.
That's the way that's cut off. It's like a cliffhanger, dramatic exit, dramatic ending. But yeah, it's a good interview. I enjoyed that. I've listened to it twice now. I've enjoyed it both times. I think it was very honest, very candid, very impactful. The fact that this was, you know, a guy who was very pro prosecution, who was interviewing them, and so, you know, can't be accused of just going on channels or, you know, news stations that are pro defense. Yeah, it's a mic drop moment. Yeah. Mic drop. So the next step is for Rick Allen to be filing his appeal. He's got 30 days from the day of sentencing, which was the 20th of December. So if I get my calendar up here, he's got 30 days to file his appeal from the 20th. So the 20th was a Friday. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 30 days is actually a Sunday. So we've got, I don't know whether Sundays count or whether it might be 30 working days. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's got like another week and a bit to file his appeal. But that's if it's 30 calendar days rather than 30 working days. If it's 30 working days, then they don't count weekends, do they? So I don't know the answer to that. So there you go. Been on here for, how long have I been on here for now? Oh, a bit short of 3 hours. Right, I'm going to go. So I will do a refresher video for those who don't want to trawl back through my videos and find the videos that I made about Libby's phone data and how the state's theory cannot possibly work if we consider the hard data that the state provided, the state's own witness provided. And yeah, I shall do that. I shall do that tomorrow, unless there's any breaking news anywhere else in the cases that I'm covering. So thank you so much for joining me. Thanks as always to the mods. Thank you to those that donated earlier on in the live stream. Welcome to the new members and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys. Oh, sorry. Not bye, guys. Bye, people. Bye, humans. Bye, wenches. Bye, folks. Bye, folks. Sometimes I use folks. I'm going to play out. I'm going to play out with a tune. Let's play out with a tune.
It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Before an angry Andrew Baldwin left the courthouse, 13 News overheard him speaking to Richard Allen's wife, saying, "It ain't over. The world's watching. The world sees what's going on."